Hey there. Tonight, let's journey back to the gaslit world of Victorian England, a place of velvet curtains and polished mahogany. But don't get too comfortable with the lace and luxury. In this story, you're not one of the fancy ones, not even close. You're a servant. And tonight, we're going to find out why that life was so incredibly difficult. You are at the very bottom of the ladder, the lowest of the low. You're the one who mops up what no one else wants to see. You wake up long before the sun even thinks about rising, and you fall into bed with a body so sore it feels like you've borrowed bruises from someone else's fight. And here's the cold, hard reality. You probably won't live to see 40. So before we begin, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. I'm also always curious to know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I love knowing who's joining me on these journeys. Now dim the lights, maybe switch on a fan for that soft, humming background noise, and let's ease into tonight's story together. Your morning begins with a jolt. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, pitch black outside, and your body is screaming at you to stay buried under your thin wool blanket. But that's a luxury you don't have. You've already overslept by 30 seconds. You know this because the kitchen maid just slammed her broom against your attic wall. She's been awake since 3, boiling water, and she is in no mood for your whining. You get dressed in the darkness. There wasn't a candle left for you tonight. You fumble around for your stiff cotton uniform, which is still damp from yesterday's scrubbing and cold enough to make your teeth chatter. Your hands, rough and cracked from work, tremble as you try to tie your apron strings. Downstairs, the rest of the house is still asleep. Upstairs, the master is snoring behind his thick velvet drapes. But you're awake, and your first job is straightforward enough. Clean everything. The floors are, of course, filthy. There's mud from the master's boots, soot tracked in from the scullery, and stray bits of flour from whatever tantrum the cook threw last night. You grab a bucket of lukewarm water, hot would be an indulgence, and a brush with bristles so sharp they could scrape your knuckles raw. The hallway tiles stretch out in front of you like a long, cold punishment. And that's only the beginning. Scrubbing floors on your hands and knees gives you time to think, but you really shouldn't. Thinking is how you fall into melancholy, and melancholy is how you get dismissed. No letter of reference, no chance of finding a new position. It's much better to just focus on the rhythm of the work. Dip, scrub, slide, wring. You can feel the rough stone under your fingertips. It's always cold. Even in the peak of summer, this floor stays cold. You've come to the conclusion that the house itself must hate you. By 5, the butler will be down. He'll just grunt if you're late and mutter something under his breath about standards. You would never dare to answer him back. Speaking too much is considered insolent. You're meant to be background noise, a presence that shouldn't be noticed unless something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. In the meantime, the fire needs to be lit. You crouch in front of the hearth, your knees popping from the effort. Yesterday's ashes are still sitting there, almost mocking you. You scoop them out with a warped metal pan, trying your best not to breathe in too much of the choking dust. Then you carefully build the new fire. Small sticks go in first, then you arrange the coal just so. If it smokes too much, the lady of the house will accuse you of trying to poison her. You strike the match with a silent prayer. Here's a fun little side fact for you. Some households actually made their servants use leftover grease or even dried animal dung to help the fires catch faster. It smelled exactly as terrible as you're imagining. By 6 o'clock in the morning, your hands are completely filthy. So is your apron, which means you're going to get scolded for having a poor presentation. Never mind the fact that you've just single-handedly made the entire house livable for the people who are about to wake up. As the first hints of sunlight peek through the windows, not for you, of course, you are already exhausted. There is a pot of tea that needs to be made, porridge to prepare, and eggs to be collected. You hurry outside to the chicken coop, your skirt getting damp with dew, where the hens give you the side eye like you're personally stealing from them. You snatch the eggs, dodging their sharp beaks, and run back inside before the cook starts yelling. And she always yells. The kitchen is her kingdom, and you are nothing but a worm crawling beneath her crusty shoes. She demands hot water, fresh towels, and complete quiet, all at the same time. You just nod and obey, your stomach growling loudly. You haven't had anything to eat yet, and you won't until everyone else has finished. That's the rule. Here's something historians still can't quite agree on. Exactly how many hours a day did a Victorian servant work? Some records say it was about 14 hours. Others suggest it was much closer to 18. Either way, your feet can confirm it's far too many. You're standing in the scullery now, your hands plunged into water that is nearly boiling. You don't get gloves. Those are for people who matter. Your fingers turn red, then white, then back to red again. You're washing yesterday's dishes while bracing for today's avalanche of porcelain. One single crack and the cost will come out of your wages that barely even cover your own keep. Another bell rings. That sound, that tiny, innocent ding coming from the master's chamber. It echoes through the servants' hallway like a gunshot. Each bell is labelled with a little nameplate. You stare at it. Master bedroom. Your stomach sinks. You wipe your hands, throw on a fresh apron, and you run. This bell system is your curse. It's a whole network of wires and clappers designed for the sole purpose of reminding you how low you are on the ladder. Each ring is a command, and every command must be followed instantly, no matter what you are in the middle of doing. Even if it's just to fetch a simple glass of water, or to stand there and listen to the master complain about his gout. When you get to the door, you knock twice, then you wait. You always wait. He doesn't answer, but you know that you're supposed to go in anyway. He's in his dressing gown, reading yesterday's newspaper, which he tosses at you without even looking up. It lands in a small puddle made by your wet shoes. He scowls. You leave the room walking backward, apologizing even though you have no idea what you're sorry for. Downstairs, another bell rings and then another one. It's only 7:15 in the morning. That's when it dawns on you that the rest of the house is waking up. And your day? It hasn't even truly begun. You barely get a moment to exhale before the cook is yelling again. Her voice could peel the wallpaper off the walls, and it's echoing down the hall like cannon fire. "Where is that water?" she screams, already elbow deep in bread dough. You bolt back toward the scullery, your shoes squelching a little from your earlier trip to the chicken coop. One of your shoelaces has come untied, but stopping to fix it would be seen as a declaration of laziness. So you just let it flap quietly against the floor, praying you don't trip and die before breakfast is even on the table. The kitchen is its own special kind of hell. I don't mean that metaphorically. It's an actual sweltering, flame-heaving hell. Even in the dead of winter, it's boiling in here, all thanks to the massive iron range that never really gets a chance to cool down. You sweat straight through your stiff uniform before 8 in the morning, and by lunchtime you smell like a mixture of ash, grease, and quiet fury. There's no airflow, no windows that you're ever allowed to open. There is only heat, sweat, and constant, frantic motion. The cook demands a rolling boil for absolutely everything, and you're the one who is responsible for keeping the kettle filled and scalding hot. You drag a heavy copper pot across the uneven floor over to the iron tap. The pump groans as a stream of cloudy water spits out. It takes what feels like forever to fill. You use this downtime to stir the porridge, feed more coal to the fire, and dodge the slap that's surely coming your way when the cook notices the butter is just a little too soft. You might be wondering, did anyone actually care about servant safety in a kitchen like this? The short answer is no. Accidents were common, burns, cuts, even full-on explosions from a blocked flue. But if you hurt yourself, it was considered your own fault for being careless. And if you couldn't work, you were out on the street. No job, no income, no room, and no food. The street didn't exactly offer workers' comp. Speaking of burns, your arm is still aching from that kettle spill last week. The cook had flung open the oven door without any warning, and you, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, took the full blast of steam directly on your wrist. You never said a word. What would have been the point? She has the housekeeper's ear, and the housekeeper is basically the judge, jury, and executioner in your little universe. By now, the first footman has made his appearance. He looks clean, polished, and freshly shaven. That's because he didn't have to boil his own water. His job is mainly to stand around looking important, maybe polish some silver, and carry heavy things if the master is expecting guests. He gives you a look as you stagger past him carrying a tray of toast and jam, a look that seems to say, "Please, be invisible." You oblige him. There's an ongoing debate among historians about how rigid these roles really were below the stairs. In theory, every servant had a clearly defined list of tasks, but in practice, the lower your rank, the blurrier those lines became. You're technically a kitchen maid, but that doesn't stop you from cleaning chamber pots or feeding the hounds if someone else decides to slack off. Now comes the absolute worst part of the morning, navigating the maze of servant hallways with a full tray. One single wrong step, and you'll be eating the master's breakfast yourself, right off the floor, just moments before you're dismissed for good. You hold the tray high and steady, tiptoeing past the green baize door. We'll get to that nightmare later, and ease your way up the narrow stairs. The heat from the kitchen clings to you like a curse, and your forehead is slick with sweat. You use your sleeve to dab at it, knowing full well that any smudge left on the porcelain will be blamed on you. You reach the morning room just as Lady V, still in her dressing gown and furiously petting an overfed Pomeranian, rings her bell twice. A double ring means you're late. You're not, but she has decided that you are. The room smells of violets and far too much rose water. Sunlight is spilling through the tall windows that you're never allowed to touch, reflecting off of polished surfaces that you spent hours cleaning just yesterday. She doesn't even look up as you set the tray down. Her breakfast is a very precise display: 2 slices of toast, 1 poached egg, 1 teacup of milk that is not too hot and not too cold, and a sugar bowl containing exactly 6 cubes. You have it all memorized. Of course you do. Your job depends on it. The dog yaps. You flinch. She snaps her fingers. "You!" she says. "More jam!" You just nod and retreat, moving backward, never, ever turning your back on her. Not because it's disrespectful, no. It's because she once threw a spoon at the undermaid for doing just that. Here's a strange fact for you. In some households, servants weren't allowed to use the same staircase as the family. You had to flatten yourself against the wall or retreat completely until the noble personage had passed. You, of course, live by this rule every single day. You know the squeak of every stair, the specific angle of every creaking board. You know how to disappear like smoke when you need to. Back in the kitchen, the cook is now in high gear. She's tossing pans and hurling insults at the scullery boy, who has somehow managed to burn the porridge again. You avoid her eyes, grab the jam, and pray for a smooth second delivery. This time, she doesn't even look up when you place it on the table. She's busy feeding the dog a piece of ham and sipping her milk a little too loudly. You exit and finally return to the scullery, where a mountain of dirty dishes is waiting for you. The breakfast rush is over for them. For you, it's just a transition. By 10 o'clock, you've been on your feet for 6 hours. No break, no tea, just the constant whirlwind of duties and fire and bells. Oh, and that pot of stew you started earlier is now boiling over. You lunge for it, grab the handle, and hiss in pain. as the hot metal scalds your palm. You only drop it slightly and manage to keep most of the contents inside. Your reward is another blister and a shout from Cook that the potatoes are crumbling like cheap morals. You're tired, you're hungry, and worst of all, you know this is just the morning shift. Lunch is next, then tea, then dinner, and then maybe, if you've done everything perfectly and no one has yelled your name in the last half hour, you'll get 15 minutes to collapse in the larder and eat a crust of bread before you have to polish silver until your back gives out. And remember, you're one of the lucky ones. You're not a coal boy or a mudlark. You live indoors, after all. Still, you eye the fire poker for just a moment, wondering how many more days your body can possibly take this. Then the bell rings again. Master's study. You sigh, grab your apron, and run. The bell in the master's study has a particularly smug little ring to it. You've learned to hate the different sounds they all make. The morning room bell is sharp and impatient. The nursery bell has a sad, whiny jangle, like a ghost who missed its bedtime. But the study bell, oh, that one chimes like it knows you were just about to take a breath. It tugs at your nerves like a violin being played with a butter knife. You rush up the back stairs again, being careful to avoid the one that creaks. The corridor leading to the study is always chilly, no matter the season. You can't help but notice how quiet it is up here, so peaceful compared to the boiling chaos downstairs. The master's world is lined with bookshelves, cigar smoke, and thick rugs that completely silence your footsteps. Everything smells like leather and pipe tobacco. You envy the carpet sometimes. Nothing ever touches it too harshly. You knock, no answer. You knock again. Still nothing, but you can hear the deep grumble of a chair shifting, so you open the door just wide enough to peek inside. He's seated behind a grand mahogany desk, surrounded by paperwork that you suspect is mostly just for show. He isn't wearing his jacket yet. You've learned not to look directly at him, but out of the corner of your eye, you spot his cravat, loosely tied, and the tumbler of brandy that really shouldn't be there before noon. "Where's the post?" he asks without looking at you. You freeze. No one gave you the letters. You haven't even seen the footman this hour, who is probably off shaving his perfectly symmetrical face or polishing shoes while humming like he's the Duke of York. "I'll fetch it, sir," you whisper, already backing out of the room. You run, you really run, down 2 flights of stairs across the hall, past the kitchen where Cook yells, "You break something, you die with it!" and into the butler's pantry. Mr. Stevens is polishing a pair of silver tongs with the kind of care usually reserved for newborn infants. You don't dare interrupt him, but you do because you have to. "The master requests the post," you say, your eyes cast downward. He raises a single eyebrow, then sighs as if your mere existence causes him pain. He hands you 3 envelopes and a rolled-up newspaper. "Tell him I'll speak with him at noon." You nod, grab the items and rush back. You knock again, enter, and hand him the letters. He doesn't thank you. He doesn't look up. You've been erased once again. Back downstairs, you pause near the servants' hall, just to catch your breath. Someone has left a slice of bread on the table. It's probably stale, maybe even someone's leftover crust, but you eat it anyway. You're starving, and dinner isn't for another 8 hours. The bread is hard enough to chip a tooth. That's when the bell rings again. Another room, another errand. You're starting to hate that sound more than fire. But let's take a second to talk about that dreaded invention, the servant bell system. It sounds quaint now, doesn't it? A simple cord in each room attached to a small bell on a labelled board in the servants' quarters. But when you're living inside that system, it's like being part of a cruel machine. One where you are the gear that just keeps spinning until it breaks. Fun fringe fact. In some of the grander houses, the bellboard had over 30 labelled bells, each connected by hidden copper wires routed through the walls. It was early electrical servitude, long before anyone cared what kind of toll that took on the people running up and down 4 floors every single hour. And get this, sometimes the cords weren't labelled with room names, but with the names of the servants. So instead of calling for a footman, the master could call for you specifically. It meant there was no hiding. You were always known, always reachable, even in those few rare minutes when you thought you might be able to disappear. There's a scholarly debate over whether this bell system actually increased efficiency or just pushed people further into exhaustion. Some argue it was a necessary evil to run such large households. Others suggest it turned human beings into living tools, endlessly on standby with no right to silence. You don't care about the debate, though. All you know is that the bells are driving you slowly insane. You spend the next hour darting between rooms, polishing this, dusting that, laying out tea trays and refolding napkins because the pattern looked tired. Every minute is accounted for. Even your posture is constantly being judged. The housekeeper once told you that if your spine curved like a question mark, it meant you were either lying or lazy. You're still not sure which accusation was worse. At one point, the maid assigned to the nursery trips and spills milk all down the steps. You grab a rag and help her mop it up. She's crying softly, her wrists shaking. You want to hug her, but you both know that touching each other might be seen as conduct unbecoming. So you just scrub beside her in silence. Then comes the worst moment of the day, the double bell. That means 2 masters want something at the exact same time, usually from the study and the parlour. And you can't clone yourself. You have to pick one and pray you chose right. You pick the parlour this time. The lady of the house wants a cushion moved, just moved slightly to the left. You shift it 3 inches and wait. She nods. Finally, she says, it was like sitting on a pile of rocks. No thank you, not even a glance. You're a ghost again. You exit the room and brace yourself for the fallout from not answering the study bell. You can just imagine the master glancing at his watch, muttering about lazy help, even though you were breaking yourself in half for the comfort of his wife's spine. And now you're sweating again. Your uniform is clinging to your back. You know you smell faintly of the scullery. You try not to breathe too deeply. You're terrified of being told to stand farther away because you resemble a stable boy. You retreat into the hallway, aching, barely upright, and somewhere in the shadows you hear the next bell chime. It's endless, a rhythm you'll never escape, like a heartbeat that isn't yours but controls every single moment of your life. You glance at the clock. It's only 11:30. The worst part isn't the exhaustion, it's the pecking order, the endless grinding machine of hierarchy that never, ever lets you forget your place. Even when you're doing the exact same work as someone above you, you just get less praise and a lot more yelling. Welcome to the social ladder below stairs, where every single rung feels like it's been greased with lard and spite. You're a lower servant, somewhere near the very bottom of the pyramid. Kitchen maid, scullery maid, general maid, it barely matters what they call you. You don't get to wear the neat uniforms like the upper housemaids or the footmen. Your apron is always stained with whatever the cook was throwing around this morning, and your sleeves smell faintly of boiled cabbage. You look tired because you are tired. You've been tired since Tuesday of last week, and it's currently Thursday, you think. Just above you is the housemaid who doesn't speak much but always walks like she owns the floorboards. She has a certain flair for changing chamber pots. Then there's the under housemaid, who is slightly more polished, usually with better posture and whiter cuffs. You end up cleaning up after both of them whenever they get distracted. And ruling over all of you is the housekeeper. She moves through the servants' wing like a queen dressed in black bombazine. She carries a giant ring of keys like it's a weapon, and she knows exactly how much soap you used yesterday. Her eyebrows have the power to wither a grown man, and she terrifies the kitchen maids even more than the cook does, which is really saying something, considering the cook once broke a broom over a spilled pudding. Then you have the male servants. Don't get too comfortable with them, though. Flirting is a fireable offence, at least for you. For them, the butler will just slap them on the back and offer them a cigar. The footmen are tall, polished, and just vain enough to check their reflections in the silver they're supposed to be polishing. The livery they wear makes them look like royalty, but they're really just glorified furniture movers with impressive calves and better lighting. You once caught one of them staring at himself in a mirror and practicing his bowing for a full 20 minutes. Then there's the valet and the lady's maid, who are, basically, the personal servants to the master and mistress. They are like the high priests of the household cult. They whisper directly into the ears of power, and it shows. They seem to glide through rooms. They drink their tea from porcelain cups. They look at you the way a cat looks at a moth, mildly intrigued, but mostly just annoyed. Finally, at the absolute summit of Mount Servitude, you have the butler, Mr. Stevens, with his pocket watch, his wine cellar keys, and his deep voice that makes every sentence sound like a funeral reading. He never raises his voice, he doesn't have to. He can freeze an entire room with just his silence. You once saw a footman drop a tray simply because the butler looked at him for too long. Now here's the kicker, none of this hierarchy is official. There's no document nailed to the pantry wall that outlines the precise chain of command. It's all just whispered rules, stiff collars, and passive-aggressive coughs in the hallway. But if you break those rules, accidentally touch the wrong tea set, or call someone by the wrong title, you'll find yourself peeling potatoes in disgrace for the next 3 weeks. Or worse, you'll be transferred to laundry duty permanently. Here's a quirky little fringe fact for you. Some households even had invisible staircases so the upper servants could avoid crossing paths with the lower ones. Servants dodging other servants. It was like a social ballet choreographed by sadists. Now there's some academic disagreement over whether all houses were this rigid. Smaller, middle-class homes were often more relaxed out of pure necessity. They didn't have 20 servants to assign specialized roles to. But in the big aristocratic houses, the kind you've landed in, everything is strictly enforced. And it gets even weirder. For example, mealtime for the servants is its own cruel kind of theatre. The order of who sits where is determined entirely by rank. You eat cold cuts while staring at the back of the butler's head. The lowest ranked servants have to sit closest to the door so they can jump up and run if a bell rings. That's you, of course. You barely get 3 bites in before someone's demanding a shoehorn or a replacement cravat. Right now, you're in the kitchen peeling carrots and trying not to attract any attention. Your goal is complete invisibility, but the cook is storming around like a hurricane in an apron, slamming pots and demanding butter that doesn't exist. The housemaid breezes in, announces that she's found the good tea towels, the ones you wash, and flounces back upstairs. The butler peeks in to remind the cook that a special guest is arriving this evening, which is code for everything must be perfect or someone will die. The pressure builds. Everyone gets a little tighter. Even the cat, a sour-faced tabby named Jasper, stalks the hallway like he's stressed out. You're sweating into the carrot bucket when the scullery boy trips and spills soapy water all over the floor. The cook roars. You drop a knife in shock. It skids dangerously close to your foot. No one asks if you're all right. You just mop, apologize, and disappear. And this is the daily atmosphere, a boiling pot of rivalry, desperation, and stiff politeness. No one truly helps anyone else unless they can trade the favor for something later on. If someone sneaks you an extra bread roll, it's only because they'll want you to cover for them during the night watch next week. Everything is leverage. Everything is a quiet calculation. The only moment of real solidarity happens late at night when the day's chaos is finally hushed, and the older housemaid shares a little bit of contraband tea. You sit on an overturned bucket in the back hallway, sipping in silence. No one speaks, there's nothing left to say, just tired eyes, blistered fingers, and the creak of the house settling around you like a giant snoring beast. That peace lasts for all of 5 minutes before the night bell rings. You toss the tea, you rise, you run, and you don't even know who called. Laundry day. Just hearing the phrase sends a shiver down your spine, even though it's not actually any colder in the stone-walled wash-house where you're about to spend the next 10 hours. You've been dreading this day all week? If the kitchen is a furnace and the upstairs is a minefield, then the laundry is the place where hope goes to wrinkle and die. You start before sunrise, yet again. The wash-house smells like lye, mildew, and defeat. Your hands are already raw, but you pull on one of your less filthy aprons and tie a scarf around your hair. You're not here to be seen, you're here to wage a war on filth. The very first thing you do is boil water. Huge iron cauldrons sit on blackened grates above flames that you have to coax into life with smoke stinging your eyes and soot coating your throat. The water hisses and spits like it knows what's coming. You feed the firewood like you're making offerings to an angry god. Once the water is bubbling, you drag in the linens, sheets, petticoats, napkins, underclothes. Oh, the underclothes. No one talks about it, but they're there. Rows of drawers and chemises from the lady of the house. All of them white, all of them delicate, all of them required to be returned in pristine condition. No yellowing, no damage, and certainly no judgment, even though you're the one who knows she definitely has a digestive issue she's pretending not to have. You reach for the first batch, dump it into the steaming pot, and stir it with a wooden paddle that's taller than you are. Every movement is slow and deliberate. You try not to inhale too much of the steam. It scalds your throat and leaves your face damp. This is not a bath, it's a punishment. While the whites are boiling, you start on the fine things, the lace collars, the silk handkerchiefs, the embroidered whatnots that serve no purpose except to impress other rich people. These can't be boiled. No, these require special, expensive soap. Soap you're not allowed to use on yourself. You rub them gently on a glass washboard, fingers praying you don't tear anything. One single rip in a hem and you'll be accused of sabotage. There's no insurance for poor servants, just scorn and docked wages. Here's a weird fringe fact for you. Some laundresses in Victorian England actually used urine, yes, actual pee, as a cleaning agent. It helped with stains and acted as a kind of bleach. You're relieved that your household doesn't subscribe to that particular tradition, though the smell in here sometimes makes you wonder. The real misery begins when it's time to wring everything out. There's no wringer of any kind in here, just your own arms and a stubborn towel that refuses to give up its water. You twist and squeeze until your knuckles crack and your muscles tremble. Then you do it again, and again, and again. Outside, the sky is slowly lightening. You've barely made a dent in the work. The pile behind you looks completely unchanged, while the pile in front of you seems to be growing. It's as if the laundry breathes and multiplies while you're not looking. You hear the first bell of the morning ring distantly, somewhere beyond the trees in the courtyard, but you don't get to answer it. Today, you are chained to the soap and steam. You pause for just a moment, stretching your aching back. A fellow laundress, Annie, passes you a tin mug filled with water. You thank her. She doesn't smile. We both know this isn't friendship, it's triage. Some historians argue about just how dangerous laundry duty really was. They say that servants exaggerated that laundry was no worse than fieldwork or factory labor. But those people never spent an entire winter's day outside, their fingers wet and stiff with cold, trying to pin sheets on a line while the wind tried to rip them from their grasp. They never heard the crack of linen snapping in the frozen air, or felt the cold climb into their boots and settle behind their knees like it belonged there. The The drying yard is muddy from last week's rain. Your shoes squelch. The hem of your petticoat soaks through. You drape the linens one by one, careful not to let them overlap, careful not to drag them in the dirt, and careful not to collapse face first into the gravel. The lady's lace gloves flutter in the breeze like little ghost hands, waving mockingly at you. And of course, once the laundry is dry, it's not done. Oh no, now it has to be pressed. Ironing means heating heavy cast iron monstrosities over hot coals and praying the handle doesn't burn your skin off. You test the iron with a single drop of water, hear the sizzle, and get to work. Each shirt must be crisp, each petticoat smooth, each tablecloth so flat it could be used as a mirror in a pinch. Your arm cramps as you iron a pleated skirt. Your shoulder twinges. You press on, literally. You think about asking the cook if she has anything for the pain, but you already know what she'll say. You're too young to be tired. Around midday, the housekeeper checks in. She doesn't actually enter the wash-house, God forbid, but she pokes her head through the door, sniffs the air, and asks whether the mistress's lace nightgown is ready yet. "Yes, ma'am," you say, handing it over carefully. She inspects it and finds a single loose thread. Do better," she says, and disappears. You want to scream, you don't. Instead, you grab the next pile and just keep going. There's no lunch break, just some hard bread left out on a chipped plate and a half-empty pot of weak tea that tastes like despair. You dunk the bread, you chew, you pretend it doesn't feel like swallowing gravel. You go back to folding. Folding means precision. Everything has to be exact. Edges aligned, corners crisp, stacks perfectly symmetrical. You blink hard against the sting in your eyes. The smoke from the earlier fire still lingers in the air, coating your lungs in ash. In the corner, Annie sneezes and it sounds like the beginning of something worse. You glance over at her. Her face is flushed, her eyes watery. She's getting sick. She can't afford to be. Neither can you. By sunset, your hands look twice your age. Your fingernails are shredded. The skin on your knuckles has split open. You carry the final load of linens up to the linen press, moving slowly, every step deliberate and careful, as if you're walking on broken glass. You slide the ironed sheets onto the wooden shelves, arrange the towels just right, and close the door, quietly. No one thanks you, no one sees you, but if a single crease is found tomorrow, it will be your fault. You return to the scullery, where the other maids are starting on dinner prep. You don't join them just yet. You sink down onto a wooden stool for 60 seconds. Just 60. You listen to the crackle of the fire and the distant clatter of silverware from upstairs. Somewhere, a bell rings. You wait for someone else to answer it. No one does. You rise. You didn't think it was possible, but tonight's task is somehow even more soul-numbing than yesterday's 12-hour shift in the wash-house. You're in the main hallway now, armed with a cloth, a bottle of polish that smells like vinegar and ruin, and a firm reminder from the housekeeper. I want to see my face in every surface. She meant it literally. She checks. You've seen her lean down, her nose practically touching the brass, inspecting door hinges like she's the queen of clean. The target of your affection tonight, the doorknobs, dozens and dozens of them, one for every room, every closet and every pointless guest chamber that no one has slept in for 3 years. They are all tarnished, of course. It's your job to make them shine without scratching them, without missing a single smudge, and without being caught making a face about it, which is harder than it sounds because you are definitely making a face. You start on the front door. It's huge, made of dark oak, with iron bolts and a brass handle the size of your fist. The polish seeps into your cracked fingers, and the cloth immediately turns black with grime. You scrub in circles over and over again until the shine finally comes through like a star, fighting its way out of a fog. You lean back, squinting. It's not bad, but it's not good enough. You lean in again and scrub even harder. Your wrist protests. You ignore it. There's a strange kind of comfort in the repetition. Scrub, breathe, shift, repeat. It's mindless, which you secretly prefer. Thinking leads to questions, and questions lead to trouble. Questions like, why am I polishing something that no one even touches? Or what if I just didn't? By doorknob number 7, you've lost all feeling in your right thumb. You've also managed to memorize the exact creak of every single hinge in the hallway. You know about the slight warp in the paneling near the dining room. You know the exact spot where the master's dog once chewed on the baseboard and got away with it. You're becoming one with the woodwork. Here's a strange fringe fact for you. In some high-end Victorian households, servants had to polish the silver door plates multiple times a day, even if no one had come or gone, because tarnish was considered a moral failing. If your brass was dull, so was your character. There's an unspoken hierarchy, even among the inanimate objects in this house. The silver gets the best polish, the brass gets the middle-tier stuff. The pewter gets a sigh and whatever's left over. You obviously get nothing. Some historians say that the obsession with cleaning and polish in these houses was tied directly to the Victorian anxiety about respectability. There was a moral edge to cleanliness. A shiny doorknob wasn't just a shiny doorknob. It was proof that the household was proper, disciplined, and thriving. As if a guest might look around and say, "Ah, yes, clearly a good family. Their coat hooks gleam." You polish on, knob after knob, hinge after hinge. The smell starts to stick to your clothes. The cloth you're using is now a murky brown, but you don't dare change it until the entire hallway is done. Waste not, want not, or, in your case, waste and get a lecture from the butler about discipline. You catch your reflection in one of the shinier knobs and immediately wish you hadn't. Your hair is flat, your face is pale, and there's a streak of soot on your temple that you didn't notice before. You look like the ghost of failed ambition. That's when you hear it. Footsteps on the stairs. Not the heavy, self-important tread of the master. Not the light, floaty trip of the lady. No, this is the butler, Mr. Stevens, walking slowly, rhythmically, like a metronome made of judgment. He pauses right behind you. "You missed one," he says, his voice as smooth as the silverware he guards like a dragon. You flinch, then immediately bend down to polish again. He doesn't leave. You polish harder. Finally, he turns and glides away without another word. You exhale. You don't cry. Not here. Not over a doorknob. You move on to the brass candlestick holders next. They were already cleaned yesterday, but apparently there's a dinner guest coming. A cousin of the lady who always smells like lavender and snobbery. So everything has to be perfect. You polish the same curves and ridges over and over again, wondering who designs these things. Someone who hates maids, surely. Someone who thinks that intricate grooves and ridiculous lion head handles make their home look fancy, not maddening. One of the upper housemaids walks by and gives you a pitying glance. She's carrying folded napkins for the table. You envy her slightly, not for the work itself. Folding napkins is tedious, but for the proximity to something soft. You haven't touched anything gentle all day. Eventually, the hallway is gleaming. You know this because you can see your own distorted reflection in every single knob and plate like a haunted house mirror gallery. You start to straighten up carefully because your spine has locked itself into a question mark, and you make your way to the staircase. More brass rails to polish. Each step has a bracket. Each bracket is filthy. You pause at the landing and stretch. Your shoulders crack audibly. You tell yourself it's a good sound. It means you're still functioning. Here's the thing that no one tells you about this job. Half of your labor is completely invisible. No guest ever walks into the front hall and says, What beautifully polished baseboards! No one applauds your meticulous attention to the spindles on the banister. They only notice if you miss one, which means you live in a world of invisible victories and very, very visible failures. You continue. By the time you finish, it's nearly time to set the dining room. You drag your bucket and cloth back to the scullery, rinse them out, and wash your hands. The skin on your fingers feels tight and is tingling raw. You splash some cool water on your face and ignore the sting in your eyes. In the servants' hall, you overhear the kitchen maid whispering that the visiting cousin is staying for 3 days. That means 3 days of extra place settings, extra sheets, extra drama. You just nod silently. You know what's coming. More work, more polish, more rules. But at least for now, the doorknobs are gleaming. You did that. You take no pride in it. You take no credit for it. But you did it. And now there's a bell ringing from the drawing room. Of course there is. You'd hoped the drawing room bell meant tea, or maybe a fire needing to be stoked. Something straightforward. But no, tonight it's worse. Much worse. You're being summoned to deal with one of the master's private matters, which is always a tangled, delicate mess, soaked in secrecy and just a touch of horror. You approach the door like it might open up and swallow you whole. You knock once, quietly. There's no response, just the muted rustle of fabric and the creak of an armchair shifting. You knock again, a little firmer this time. "Enter!" comes the reply, sharp, clipped, and all too familiar. You push the door open, your eyes fixed on the floor as you're expected to. The master is standing by the fireplace, his cravat loose, his waistcoat unbuttoned, which is already far too much information for you. A woman is sitting in the corner. She is not the lady of the house. You don't look at her. You know the rules. She has thick ringlets, smudged lipstick, and a perfume so sweet it makes your throat close up. She's adjusting her stocking as you enter. You try not to see her. "Clean this up," the master says, not even turning to face you. You nod, step forward, and see the mess. A shattered glass, a splash of something red, wine, you hope, and a trail of silk ribbon leading halfway under the chaise lounge. You gather it all silently. The woman giggles. The master says nothing. His silence is worse than yelling. You sweep the glass into your apron and blot the carpet with a rag. The wine is soaking into the brocade rug, the one from Italy, the one you weren't even allowed to vacuum without supervision last month. You dab at it carefully, aware that if a single stain remains, you'll be the one accused of sabotaging family heirlooms. The woman starts to hum a tune. You recognize it. It was sung by one of the parlour maids last month, right before she vanished without any explanation. The master finally speaks again, his tone casual. "Leave the windows open for a while. It's stuffy in here." You don't respond. You don't make eye contact. You simply nod again and leave, clutching the wine-soaked rag and the ribbon in your apron like they're damning evidence. In the hallway, you finally breathe for the first time in minutes. The air is stale, thick with tobacco and rosewater and shame. You exhale slowly. It's not your business. It's never your business. But still, here is the unspeakable truth that pulses beneath every gilded cornice and marble fireplace. You, the servant, are the keeper of the house's secrets. You know what the guests don't. You know who sneaks down the back stairs at night, who leaves their corsets hanging on the bedpost, who drinks in the library long after midnight, and who has a fondness for companions not listed on any marriage certificate. And you clean it all up, all of it. Blood, lipstick, broken glass, tears. It's your job to restore the illusion. Your reward for this is silence. If you speak, you're gone. No reference, no job, and possibly worse. There's a scholarly debate, of course. Some historians argue that Victorian households maintained a firm moral discipline, especially among the aristocracy. Others, perhaps less starry-eyed, point out that these grand houses were often dens of hypocrisy, where wealth and power cloaked a constant churn of scandal, affairs, and inconvenient pregnancies that were simply swept under imported rugs. Fringe Fact. In a few households, the lady's maid or a scullery maid would mysteriously vanish for several months, only to return thinner, quieter, and with slightly different duties. Sometimes it was explained as a visit to family. Other times it was a stint in a hidden cottage where a baby would be born and quietly placed elsewhere. You've seen it happen, and not just once. Back in the scullery, you empty your apron, the ribbon gets stuffed into the kindling box, the rag goes into the boiling pot with the rest of the stained linens. You pour water over the apron itself, scrubbing at the wine stain like your own life depends on it, because in a way it does. Then comes another task, this one less scandalous but more grotesque. One of the chamber pots from the guest room needs emptying. Of course it does. You draw the short straw because the undermaid conveniently remembered she had a sewing chore she simply must get to. So up you go again, this time with a pail and a practiced expression of blank disinterest. You've become strangely immune to chamber pot duty. The first few times were traumatic. Now it's just Wednesday. You hold your breath, pour carefully, and clean the porcelain with practiced efficiency. But this particular guest must have been suffering from something awful. You suppress a gag and silently curse the beef stew. And here's the sick twist. You're grateful no one else had to see this, because even among the servants, there's a kind of pride in suffering silently. You're considered stronger if you can clean up vomit with a steady hand. You're reliable if you can keep your face straight while removing stains from a man's trousers that are definitely not mud. It's dark now. The house is glowing with candlelight and gas lamps. Dinner is being served upstairs. You can hear laughter, the clink of forks, the tinkle of a piano coming from the drawing room. All of it is filtered through the thick barrier of class and walls and expectations. You're not even supposed to notice, but you do. As the night stretches on, you pass the green baize door again, the one that separates the servants' world from the family's. It swings open for a second. You glimpse a guest, twirling a glass of wine, laughing as he wipes his mouth with a linen napkin that you ironed this morning. He doesn't see you, he doesn't even know you exist. And for a moment, you don't want to. The last task of the night is to deliver clean linens to the guest rooms. You walk quietly, placing folded towels and neatly ironed sheets at the foot of each bed. One room smells strongly of lavender and gin. Another is suspiciously warm, as if someone is still inside even though you were told they had gone out. You don't knock. You don't pause. You just place the linen and go. You're back in your attic by midnight. The other girls are already asleep. You don't bother lighting a candle. You take off your apron, lie down fully clothed, and just stare at the ceiling, listening to the slow drip of rain on the slate roof. You feel a tremor in your legs from walking up and down the stairs 100 times today. Your arms still smell faintly of polish. Your mind replays the ribbon, the giggle, the master's voice. But you say nothing. You sleep anyway, because tomorrow someone will need you to erase them all over again. You wake up with the stink of ammonia in your nose and the feeling of something damp soaking through your petticoat. It's no surprise, it's chamber pot day again. And someone upstairs clearly had too much of something rich and regrettable for dinner. The scent seeps into the floorboards, climbs up the stairs, and punches you awake before the sun even tries to help. You sit up slowly, your body so stiff it feels like you've been rolled up and stored in a cupboard overnight. Your fellow maids are already gone, their beds cold and empty. You've missed the first call of the day. That is not a good sign. You throw on your dress, grab your apron, and dash downstairs without even lacing your boots, trying to keep your hair from springing out of its pins. Down below, the house is just beginning to stir. Up above, the first bell of the morning rings, a low, grumpy jingle that means the master has decided to exist again. But your first job today is filthier than yesterday's secrets. You've been assigned to the chamber pot rounds. Let's just be clear about this. Victorians had an impressive ability to pretend their lives were elegant while doing their business in buckets under their beds. And it is your job to deal with that. Dozens of ceramic vessels, most of them with floral patterns, to disguise the horror within. You carry 2 at a time, 1 in each hand, with your arms held straight out to avoid any sloshing. You've learned how to walk like a tightrope performer. The stakes are much higher than a circus fall. If you spill one of these on the carpet, you might as well just pack your things and throw yourself into the Thames. You make it to the sluice room, a dark, barely ventilated box tucked away behind the scullery. The smell hits you like a slap. It always does, no matter how many times you do this. You dump the contents, then scrub the porcelain with a stiff brush and boiling water. There are no gloves. Your fingers go raw. You think you might have found something alive in one of the pots. You don't look too closely. Here's your fringe fact. Not all chamber pots were simple buckets. Some were incredibly ornate, with silver trims and even music boxes built into the lids to drown out the acoustics. You, of course, get the cracked ones, the ones with worn-out handles and a chipped rim that gives you a new cut every single week. And don't get any ideas about being done quickly. No, the family had guests last night, which means extra pots and extra fluids. One of them must be on some kind of special tonic, because their offering smells like old eggs and horror. You gag quietly. You have become a master of silent nausea. There is a debate, of course there is, about whether servants truly had to do this every single day, or if the duty was rotated. Some historians think this task was passed around to keep one person from going completely mad. But you know how it works in your house. If you're good at something, it becomes yours forever. You made the mistake of being efficient on chamber pot duty last week, so now it's you every time, until the end of days, or until someone else drops a pot and gets reassigned. You scrub, you rinse, you stack the clean ones with mechanical precision. The floor is slick with something, hopefully just water, and your boots slide as you haul the last of the loads back up the stairs. You place each pot back under the bed where it belongs, wondering if the people sleeping above you even know or care that a girl with bleeding knuckles and sore arms has just sanitized their personal porcelain toilet. And the worst part isn't the smell, it's not the stains, it's the silence, the absolute, brutal lack of acknowledgement. You have just spent the last 2 hours removing human waste from floral pots with gold rims, and when you step back into the hallway, the butler walks right past you as if you're a particularly offensive patch of wallpaper. You go to wash your hands again. The cold tap in the scullery drips unevenly as if it's judging you. You scrub with soap until your hands sting. There's still something under your nails. You give up. Then the cook yells. You flinch. It's time for the breakfast rush, and the bacon is burning because the scullery boy, predictably, is late and already whimpering over something. You leap in, slicing bread, stirring porridge, passing plates. You're not technically on kitchen staff today, but that doesn't matter. When chaos strikes, you become whatever the house needs you to be. Maid, cook, nurse, furniture. No one asks. The smell of grease mingles with the last whiff of the sluice room that is still clinging to your hair. You catch your reflection in a copper pot lid, and you almost laugh. Your face is pale, your eyes are tired, your apron is stained, and your entire body smells like a contradiction. Upstairs, the master is reading the paper, sipping tea that you brewed, in a dressing gown that you ironed, while sitting on a chair that you dusted with a view through windows that you cleaned. He will not think of you once today. You're finally allowed a 5-minute break after breakfast. You sit on a crate in the passageway by the back stairs. You're holding a crust of bread in one hand and a chipped tin mug of weak tea in the other. The bread is hard. The tea is colder than you are. You eat it anyway. The senior housemaid joins you for a moment. She's older, maybe 35, though the lines around her eyes make her seem ancient. She strikes a match off the wall and offers you the spent warmth. You both just sit there in silence, the way soldiers do after a lost battle. She says, "It's never really clean, is it?" You shake your head. She's not talking about the chamber pots anymore. Back on duty, you're assigned to scrub the stair rails again, the ones near the guest bedrooms. You work in silence, a cloth in one hand and polish in the other. As you scrub, you hear laughter from upstairs, a man's laugh, a woman's giggle, then silence, then a door closing. You don't react. The rail gleams. You just keep polishing. Later that afternoon, you carry tea up to the ladies' sitting room. She doesn't look at you. She's busy writing a letter. You place the tray on her table. As you turn to leave, she says, without looking up, "The linen in the blue guest room smelled odd. See to it?" You nod. You don't mention that you just spent 2 hours boiling sheets that belonged to her cousin, the one who threw up into a silk slipper last night. You don't mention the lavender sachet you tucked inside to mask the scent. You don't mention anything at all. You simply nod and leave. And on your way back down, you pass the green baize door again. Always that door. Always the reminder that you are just a breath apart from lives you'll never touch, but will forever be cleaning up after. You don't cry. You just move on to the next room and hope it doesn't involve any more mystery fluids. You're halfway through folding the linens again. Yes, the same ones from the guest room that were allegedly offensive to Lady V's delicate nose, when you catch a glimpse of something that momentarily lifts your eyes from the starch and folds. The drawing room door swings open for just a breathless second, and there, under the golden candlelight and a chandelier dripping with crystal, stands a woman in a silk gown the colour of crushed roses. She laughs, tipping her head back, her throat glinting with pearls. Behind her, a young man is playing the piano like it's his second language. It's perfect. It's surreal. It's completely untouchable. You freeze, cloth still in hand, watching from just behind the green baize door, the one servants are not supposed to linger near, let alone peer through. The door itself is a symbol, painted to blend in with the shadows and trimmed to ensure it stays visually insignificant. A barrier, a dividing line. On one side, there is music, laughter, and chandeliers. On the other side, there is you. You were not meant to see any of this. These are stolen visions. If you're caught, you'll be scolded again for forgetting your station, but you can't help it. Moments like these are the flickers of another life, one you'll never touch, but sometimes fantasize about during the quietest part of laundry day. When the heat is numbing and your mind starts to wander, you like to imagine what it might feel like to be a guest here, to wear a dress you didn't sew yourself, to smell like violets instead of lye, to eat cake without having to clear the crumbs afterward. But that world is not yours. You retreat quickly, the door closing behind you with a polite little click that feels more final than a slammed gate. Back in the servants' hallway, the contrast is stark. There are no chandeliers here, just gas lamps that flicker like they might give up at any second. The air smells faintly of cabbage and old stone. Your boots squish slightly on the damp floor. Everything is the same as it always is, but now, after seeing the other side again, it all feels just a little more unbearable. Here's a fringe detail you don't hear much about. Servants were often trained to walk silently, especially when crossing near rooms where the family might be able to hear them. You were taught early on, heel, toe, like a cat, except cats aren't also carrying full trays of porcelain or buckets of ash. As you walk back toward the servants' hall, your eyes instinctively glance upward. There's a mirror at the landing on the first floor, a gift from some long-dead uncle, that was imported from France. You're not supposed to look at it, of course, but you do. You always do. It shows a distorted version of the house, a sweeping staircase, gold-tipped banisters, and wall panels carved with grapes and hunting scenes. Sometimes, if you position yourself just right, you can see yourself inside that world for a few seconds. Tonight, you just look and catch your full reflection. A girl with a crooked apron, a smudge on her cheek, and eyes ringed with the kind of purple that no amount of rest will ever fix. You stare. The mirror doesn't blink. You step away. There is a scholarly debate about whether servants longed for upward mobility or simply for survival. Some argue that domestic service was viewed as a respectable profession, structured, steady, offering room and board. Others, with perhaps more candour, call it a slow death in a tidy uniform. You, personally, have no opinion. Or rather, your opinion is the same as your breakfast, plain, cold, and swallowed without comment. Tonight's dinner service is one of the more formal ones. The visiting cousin is still here, 2 days into his stay, and already drinking the house dry. He likes to make loud, amusing comments about the help within earshot, assuming that none of you speak full English or have working ears. During yesterday's dinner, he tried to guess the kitchen maid's age based on how bow-legged she looked. You didn't laugh, neither did she. You're on tea duty tonight. It's simple work, but stressful. You must deliver the tray without making a sound. The cups must be placed in the correct orientation, handles facing right, sugar at the hostess's elbow, and the milk must be neither too hot nor too cold. There was a tea disaster last year. A scullery girl served it lukewarm and was sent packing that very evening. No reference, just gone. You carry the tray carefully. Every clink feels like an accusation. The hallway outside the dining room is polished so brightly that it reflects your shoes. You hope you remembered to wipe them. You step inside, place the tray, and retreat. No one looks up. No one thanks you. Back downstairs, the underfootman is snoring in a chair near the wine cellar. The cook passes by, smacks him on the shoulder with a ladle, and keeps walking. He startles upright, his eyes wide, then slumps again. He's younger than you are, and he looks twice as broken. It's nearly 9 o'clock now, and you haven't eaten since midday. Dinner for the servants is served late, after the family has finished and all the dishes have been cleaned. Tonight, it's thin stew and stale bread. You eat quickly, seated on a hard bench in the servants' hall, elbows kept close, conversation minimal. No one wants to talk. You're all just saving your energy for the evening rounds. You're sent to check the drawing room fire. This requires slipping in silently, adding coal without making any sparks, and escaping completely unseen. It's risky. The cousin is still in there, wine glass in hand, legs crossed like he owns every chair in Britain. As you enter, he turns. "Ah," he says, "the coal fairy." You say nothing. You crouch, add 3 lumps and brush the hearth. He watches you. You want to disappear. He chuckles, swirling his glass. "Do you ever speak, little shadow?" You rise, your back still turned to him, and walk out. You hear him laugh again as the door closes behind you. Here's your historical fact for the night. Victorian homes were often built with hidden servant passageways, narrow and twisting, that allowed you to travel the entire house without being seen. You live in those paths, you exist in the walls, you move like breath through a mansion's lungs, never noticed, but always essential. The night ends, as they all do, with a check of the drawing rooms, a last sweep of the hallway, and a weary trudge up the servant stairs. Your legs ache. Your feet throb. Your arms still smell faintly of polish and smoke. You crawl into bed without changing, too tired to care. The ceiling stares back. The rain starts again, soft and steady on the roof, tapping out a rhythm that is older than you are, older than this house. You close your eyes. On the other side of the green baize door, someone laughs. It's Sunday morning, which you might think would offer some kind of reprieve. A tiny breath of fresh air, perhaps. A moment to yourself, maybe even a half day off to sit in a sunbeam and read a borrowed novel with a tear in its cover. But no, it's still work. It's just work in different clothes. Today, you're not in your usual plain cotton dress and work apron. No, today you've squeezed yourself into your Sunday best, which is really just a slightly less worn version of your regular uniform, but with tighter sleeves, shoes that pinch, and an awkward bonnet that makes you look like you've just escaped from a watercolor painting. Everything itches. The collar digs into your throat like a moral warning. Your boots squeak with every single step, as if protesting the whole charade. The first task of any Sunday is getting everyone else ready for their Sabbath, which means helping the upstairs maids prep the ladies' wardrobe. Layers upon layers of petticoats, delicate gloves and bonnets, trimmed with the feathers of birds that probably went extinct just for the sake of fashion. The master wears black, of course, as if he's attending his own funeral. And the children are scrubbed and starched until they look like dolls who have never had a single rebellious thought in their lives. And what do you get? Church duty. But not as a worshipper. Not really. You're going because the housekeeper says it helps to keep the staff morally upright. You attend the family's designated chapel along with the other lower servants. You have to sit in the very back behind a stone column with a chipped angel that blocks most of your view of the altar. The only time you see daylight is through the stained glass, and even that is distorted. Here's a strange little fringe fact for you. Some servants were required to memorize hymns and recite the 10 Commandments weekly just to prove they were respectable. As if remembering "thou shalt not covet" somehow made your 10-hour shift in the washhouse more virtuous. Church lasts for a full hour, and you spend most of it trying to keep your eyes open while perched on a splintery pew next to the scullery boy, who smells like turnip water and wet socks. The priest speaks of divine order, of everyone knowing their proper place, of the virtue of labor. You try not to laugh or cry. Your stomach growls and someone behind you sighs loudly. Heaven, if it exists, surely smells better than this. But back at the house, the real irony kicks in. Sunday is the lady's favorite day for entertaining guests, which means your afternoon is completely packed. You'd think the Sabbath might inspire her to rest, or at least to fake a headache and retire early. But no, the drawing room needs fresh flowers, the porcelain tea service must be absolutely spotless, and every single cushion must be fluffed within an inch of its life. The worst part of all is the Sunday roast. It's a production on par with a royal banquet. Cook starts the meat early, and by noon, the entire kitchen is a roasting, boiling, hissing beast of heat and shouting. You're handed a knife and told to prepare the carrots. You slice until your fingers go numb. Then it's the turnips, then the peas. By the time you're done, your apron is dotted with vegetable shrapnel, and your back feels like it's been folded in half. Lunch for the servants is a rushed affair. Some dripping laced scraps of roast and a dry wedge of bread, if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, you're still working while everyone else eats. You chew quickly, standing up, then run upstairs to assist with setting the tea table. And here's where Sunday really stings. Your break comes in the form of enforced mending. Yes, that dress with the ripped seam from 2 weeks ago, that's your responsibility. So is the footman's fraying sleeve and the laundrymaid's torn apron. You sit in the servants' hall with a needle, squinting under the flickering gaslight, stitching like your life depends on it, which, to be fair, it kind of does. If you're caught skipping your mending duties, the housekeeper will ask whether your time might be better spent finding new employment. The parlour bell rings. You go. It's a guest requesting a different cushion, again. The third one today. You're beginning to think this woman has a personal vendetta against upholstery. You just nod, fetch another one from the linen closet, and return just in time to be completely ignored. She lifts her feet while you switch out the cushions, then drops them with a sigh as though your hands were made of air. You wonder just for a moment what it would feel like to drop a cushion directly onto her lap. Hard, like a fluffy rebellion, but you don't. Of course you don't. Scholars still debate how much free time servants actually had on Sundays. Some claim the afternoons were meant for leisure, even for outings. Others say it was just an illusion, breaks that were disguised as chores, rest that always came with an apron attached. Your own experience makes the answer pretty clear. Sunday is just Monday, with more starch and fewer potatoes. The evening approaches, and the house settles back into its usual rhythm. The guests leave. The cousin makes one last obnoxious joke about the wine. The lady yawns delicately. The master retires with his decanter, and the rest of you clean it all up. You're sweeping the front hall now, the stiff brush grating over tiles that haven't really been dirty since yesterday, but still require freshening. The butler is inspecting the silver near the entryway. The housekeeper walks by, her skirts swishing ominously. She nods once. It means good, but not too good. Don't get smug. It's nearly 9 o'clock again and you are aching all over. Your boots pinch harder now, the insides worn down to the stitching. The tight Sunday collar has left a faint red ring around your neck. You change back into your everyday uniform, which somehow feels softer now, less like a costume, less like a lie. You retreat to the kitchen for one final chore, prepping for Monday. The week begins again in just a few hours. You lay out the cloths, check the soap, and refill the polishing oil. You do all of this while thinking about nothing at all because it's the only way to survive. Then you climb the stairs one last time, slow and careful. The other girls are already in bed. The room is quiet, dark, and filled with the soft sound of breathing. You wash your hands in the little basin near your bed. The water is cold and smells faintly of iron. Your fingers are still pricked from all the mending. Your palms smell like carrots and lye. You crawl into bed. The blanket is scratchy, but it's yours. You pull it up to your chin and stare at the ceiling. Somewhere, the church bell rings in the distance, marking the end of the Sabbath, and all you can think is, thank God that's over. There are days when the work feels completely mechanical, your body just going through motions so familiar they don't even register as choices anymore. But today feels personal, because today it seems like everyone is watching you. Not just watching, but evaluating, dissecting, silently noting every single movement, every blink, every fraction of a mistake. You're not entirely sure why. Maybe you've made someone angry without realizing it. Maybe the house is just in one of its moods, but the eyes are everywhere today, and your nerves are completely fried before breakfast has even been served. It starts with the butler, of course. Mr. Stevens looms at the top of the service stairs while you're arranging the boot tray, his arms folded, his lips pursed, like he's trying not to be disgusted by your very existence. You're aligning the shoes exactly as he taught you. Heels flush, toes forward, but still, he hums that little that sounds like a knife being sharpened. You can feel his eyes boring into the back of your head as you work, like a schoolmaster just waiting for you to sneeze during a scripture reading. Next comes the housekeeper. She materializes in the linen press just as you're folding towels, her favorite spot for an ambush. She says nothing at first, just watches you from the doorway with the look of a woman who is about to subtract a penny from your wages for breathing too loudly. Then she steps forward, plucks a towel from your perfectly stacked pile, and refolds it. Edges must be sharp, she says coolly. She refolds 3 more, hands them back to you and walks away. You want to scream. Instead, you just keep folding. Upstairs, while delivering fresh towels to the blue guest room, the same one you re-laundered twice last week, you catch the lady of the house glancing at you over her morning paper. She doesn't speak, but you feel it. That pause, that flick of her eyes, a silent assessment, as if she's wondering whether your posture has slipped, or if your expression seems a little too human. You keep your face neutral, pleasant, but not too pleasant, helpful, but not eager. You've learned to aim for invisibility with sharp edges. It's a special kind of torture, this performance, because everything about your job depends not just on doing the work, but on doing it with the right attitude. You can scrub a floor until it gleams like a mirror, but if you do it with clenched teeth or a little too much speed, someone will accuse you of rushing, or worse, of resentment. There's a fringe fact that might make you groan. Some Victorian employers kept little notebooks to record their servants' behaviour. Yes, actual ledgers filled with notes like, "Mary seemed sullen at supper," or "Annie's lace was untidy." These would then be referenced when deciding who got recommendations or who mysteriously ended up being let go. You wonder sometimes what your page looks like in that invisible book. After breakfast, the real parade begins. Everyone in the household seems to need something from you, specifically. The footman can't find the silver-handled brush. The valet wants extra starch in the master's cravat. The kitchen maid asks you to carry a tray because she's hurt her wrist, and every single one of them watches you as you do it, gauging your speed, your silence, your posture, your compliance. You feel less like a person and more like a product that's on trial. There is no privacy, not even among the servants. You share a room, a hall, a staircase. You dress and undress surrounded by the eyes of other girls who have learned to keep score through quick glances and whispered critiques. Everyone is watching everyone else because no one wants to be the one who slips up. You know that if you trip on the stairs or leave a smudge on the mirror, the word will travel faster than a fire in the laundry room. And yet the hierarchy protects some and exposes others. You, for instance, can be corrected for forgetting to knock before entering a room. But the footman, he can make a lewd comment in the scullery and still be considered charming. You overhear one of the ladies' maids complaining to the housekeeper that you didn't curtsy deeply enough. She didn't even look at you when she said it. You make a mental note to curtsy next time as if your knees are made of prayer. There is a scholarly debate about how much surveillance really existed in Victorian homes. Some say it was oppressive and constant. Others argue that it was more about internalized discipline, with servants learning to monitor themselves. From your perspective, it's both. You live under 1,000 silent rules that are enforced not just by your superiors, but by your own fear of being noticed in the wrong way. Even the house itself feels like it's watching you. The mirrors reflect your fatigue. The tall, echoing halls magnify the sound of your missteps. The walls seem to close in slightly whenever the mistress is in a foul mood. And today, she is in a very foul mood. Her voice carries down the corridor as she scolds her lady's maid for something trivial, probably a hairpin placed 2 inches too far to the left. You hear every single word and you flinch on behalf of the other girl, even though she is technically above you in the servant pyramid. By mid-afternoon, your nerves are strung as tight as a wire. You've smiled at everyone. You've apologized for things that were not your fault. You've redone your folding twice. You've checked and rechecked every bell pull in the guest wing. Still you can feel it, that sense of being watched, weighed, and judged. Then comes the final straw, a misplaced cloth in the drawing room. You'd set it there while dusting, meaning to return for it, but then a bell rang, and you rushed away. Now it has been spotted. The lady of the house is holding it delicately between 2 fingers, as if it's a dead bird. "Whose is this?" she asks, turning to the butler. He looks directly at you. "It was mine, madame," you say quickly, stepping forward. "Apologies. I meant to return for it. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't have to. "I expect better," she says, then drops the cloth onto the side table as if it might bite her. You collect it silently, curtsy, and retreat. Downstairs, the other maids avoid your eyes. No one says a single thing. The judgment isn't verbal, it's atmospheric. You sit on a crate in the scullery for 30 seconds, your head in your hands, before someone tells you the drawing room fire needs tending to again. Of course it does. You go because someone is always watching, and you can't afford to be seen slipping up. It always starts with the collar, starched so stiff it could double as body armor, pressed so sharply it feels like it might slice your neck open if you breathe the wrong way. You hate it. You hate the entire uniform today. The bodice pinches, the sleeves are too tight around your shoulders, and your hem seems to catch on every single stair you climb. You're a walking blister, wrapped in itchy cotton and propriety. And there's no changing out of it until well after nightfall. Today, you're on formal duty, which means you have to look presentable. And by presentable, they mean invisible, but immaculate, like a doily that no one ever notices, unless there's a wrinkle in it. You're expected to blend into the wallpaper, but still somehow radiate dignity, obedience, and the faint suggestion of floral freshness. You check your reflection in the scullery's cracked mirror. Your hair is pinned neatly, with no strands loose. Your apron is clean, though your hands are already inked with polish residue from earlier. You scrub at them with a cloth, even though it stings. Presentation matters more than comfort, more than blood circulation. The uniforms are a trap, really. They're meant to make you look proper and upright, but they're built with the structural integrity of a corset made of tree bark. The fabric is completely unyielding, the buttons are too high, and the seams are stitched as tight as secrets. Your stockings itch. Your shoes are stiff enough to turn a walk across the hallway into a kind of medieval foot torture. And forget about any weather accommodations. In the summer, you sweat buckets and are told not to look shiny. In the winter, you freeze inside layers that might as well be made of paper for all the warmth they provide. Heaven help you if you ask for thicker socks. You'll just get a lecture about economy and be told to move faster to stay warm. Here's a strange little fringe fact about Victorian uniforms. In many houses, you weren't even allowed to wash your own clothing. You had to hand it over to the laundry maids and just hope they didn't gossip about the state of your underthings. And if your uniform went missing or came back ruined, it was still your fault. Always your fault. You make your way upstairs, smoothing the skirt of your uniform every third step, mostly out of habit, but also because there is a new guest in the house, a baroness, allegedly. She arrived yesterday in a cloud of perfume and disdain, bringing with her 3 trunks, a tiny dog, and an assistant who cries silently into her handkerchief when she thinks no one is watching. This morning, the Baroness is demanding hot chocolate at 11 o'clock. Not tea, not coffee, but hot chocolate. In August, you're the one who has been assigned to deliver it. The cook has already complained about it twice. The butler raised an eyebrow so sharp it nearly sliced a cucumber. But no one questions it. She's a guest, and guests get what they want. You carry the tray slowly, carefully. The porcelain is delicate. The chocolate is filled too high. One bump and it will splash. One stain on your uniform and you'll be sent back downstairs to change, wasting time and proving that you're unsuited for front-of-house tasks. You reach the drawing room and pause. You take a deep breath. You knock twice. You wait. You hear the dog bark, then a disinterested, "Come in." You enter, spine straight, face neutral, like a mannequin that happens to have nerves. She doesn't look at you, of course not. She's busy adjusting the dog's velvet ribbon. You place the tray exactly where you were instructed and step back. The dog snarls. You flinch. "Too much cream?" she says, without even tasting it. You nod. Shall I fetch another, madame? No, just take this away. You take it. You back out of the room. You close the door quietly, like shame slipping back into its corner. Downstairs, the cook glares. What now? You tell her. She mutters something about a pampered witch and pours another cup. You carry it back up, reheating your smile on the way. You deliver, you nod, you leave. The dog growls again. You fantasize just for a moment about stepping on its absurd little leash. Back in the servants' corridor, you brush some invisible lint off your skirt, already dreading the next inspection, because that's the other joy of formal duty. You're not just expected to look presentable, you are inspected randomly and with prejudice. The housekeeper makes her rounds shortly after noon. You hear the telltale rustle of her skirts, like storm clouds rolling down the hallway. She stops in front of each servant, her eyes scanning for flaws. Dust on a collar? You're lazy, wrinkles in your apron, you're sloppy, a loose button, you're a degenerate. When she gets to you, she pauses, looks, and then says, "You're lopsided." You blink. "Sorry, Mum?" Your hem, it's uneven. Fix it before dinner service. You nod, your heart sinking. The hem, of course, is perfectly even. You measured it twice this morning, but you say nothing. You go downstairs, grab a needle and thread, and redo the entire thing by hand just in case. Here's a curious debate among historians. Were uniforms a sign of pride or of oppression? Some say the consistency and polish gave servants a kind of dignity, a symbol of their vital role in the house. Others argue it was pure control, fashion as a leash. You don't really care what the books say. All you know is that your dignity shouldn't have to come with bleeding feet and a neckline that threatens to strangle you during stair duty. You adjust your collar again as you walk to the dining room. The buttons on the back always dig in when you bend over. You have to wear them fastened high up for formal service. Not one can be missed. You can't even do them yourself. This morning, Annie had to help you, tugging and yanking until your spine popped. "Sorry," she'd muttered. "Your back's being stubborn again." You told her it wasn't the only thing. Dinner begins. You stand off to the side like a piece of furniture with a pulse. When a guest needs something, you step forward. Quiet, quick, expressionless. Someone asks for a different knife. Someone spills wine. Someone insists the lamp is too dim. You respond to all of it with poise and a burning sensation in your lower back from standing completely still for hours. The uniform traps the sweat between your shoulder blades. Your stockings have twisted. Your heel has started to bleed again. You wonder if anyone can smell the blood through the leather. At long last, the guests retire. You clear the table, being careful not to let the silver clatter. In the kitchen, the scullery boy has already filled the sink. You pass him the plates. He doesn't meet your eyes. His collar is too big for his neck. He's got it pinned with a safety pin. You envy him. You unbutton your uniform slowly once the day is finally over. The bodice clings where the sweat has dried. Your ribs are red from the corset stays. You tug off the boots and just stare at your toes, blistered, purple, and slightly swollen. The uniform lies on the chair like a dead thing, elegant, restrictive, and utterly exhausting. You crawl into bed wearing only your undershift, your legs dangling off the edge. You consider setting your stockings on fire. Instead, you sleep. Tomorrow, you'll put it all back on again. The green baize door is just a door. It's made of wood, with a plain knob and a coat of paint the colour of sickly peas. It doesn't even creak. It doesn't have a lock. But somehow it holds the power of a guillotine. You pass through it several times a day, but never without a sense of awareness. It's the threshold between two different worlds, theirs and yours, and you do not belong on the other side. You're not supposed to look directly into the rooms past that door. You're not supposed to listen when the laughter spills out or when arguments carry down the corridor. You are definitely not supposed to speak unless you are spoken to. And even then, your voice is meant to be low and deferential, like the murmur of the wind in the drapes. You move through the edges of their lives like a shadow, always present, but never seen. Today, you've been assigned to help with the morning refresh, tidying the drawing room, straightening the rug, and opening the windows to let in a breeze that you, of course, are not allowed to enjoy. You cross through the green baize door just as Lady V's dog bolts past your ankles. You don't react, that's part of it too, the expectation that you are somehow emotionally padded, unbothered, polite in the face of chaos, and silent in the face of cruelty. You adjust a chair by half an inch, you fluff a cushion, you pick up a dropped letter from the floor, carefully placing it on the desk where Lady V will find it later and accuse someone of moving her things. You open a window, even though the draft will undoubtedly be considered your fault when someone sneezes later. And then suddenly she's there. The lady of the house sweeps in like a storm wrapped in silk. She barely acknowledges you, muttering something about her headaches and the dreadful state of the rose garden. You step aside, your eyes lowered, like a piece of furniture that has been trained in etiquette. She drops her shawl on a footstool. You bend to retrieve it and place it neatly on the arm of the chair. She doesn't thank you, she rarely does. Here's a fringe fact you might enjoy. In certain households, even eye contact from a servant was considered offensive. You could be reprimanded for looking directly at a guest, unless, of course, you were being yelled at, in which case you were expected to make uncomfortable, tear-brimming eye contact while apologizing for the state of the asparagus tips. There is a scholarly debate over the role of the green baize door. Some historians say it was merely a practical division, keeping the noise and smells of the working areas separate from the living quarters. Others insist it was a symbol, a psychological barrier designed to reinforce the Victorian obsession with hierarchy and the separation of classes. To you, it's both, a door and a warning, an everyday reminder that you are tolerated but not accepted. After the drawing room, you carry clean linens up to the guest suite. The corridor up there is brighter, smells better, and has been freshly dusted by a maid who never seems to sweat. You place the folded sheets in the linen cupboard, careful to align them perfectly. That's when you hear it. Laughter coming from the nursery. You shouldn't pause, but you do, just for a second. The children are playing some ridiculous game involving pillows and a wooden sword. Their governess is pretending not to notice. Their shoes are scattered across the floor like modern art. You watch from behind the barely open door. They don't see you. You wonder what it's like to be loud without any consequences, to throw things, to laugh until you hiccup, to not think about how you're being perceived every single waking second. Then the hallway bell chimes, and you snap back to reality. It's time to polish the front stair banisters again. They have already been polished, you polished them, but apparently a guest noticed a smudge, and now it's a catastrophe that must be corrected immediately. So you go. You grab the cloth, the polish, the patience, and you kneel beside the steps like a humble little saint of woodwork. As you scrub, voices drift down from the library. The Baroness is still here, speaking loudly about politics she doesn't understand and literature she hasn't read. You hear her ask, "What's that smell?" And someone mutters, "Coal smoke." You pray it's not you. Here's another fun twist for you. Air. If you're caught standing near the green baize door without a specific task, the assumption is that you are eavesdropping. That is a serious offence. It doesn't matter if you were just catching your breath or adjusting your apron. The wrong glance, the wrong pause, and you're labelled as insolent. You learn to time your movements perfectly, to know when the hallway is empty, when it's safe to dash through with a tray, and when you can slip into the servant staircase without being seen. It's a dance that has been choreographed by necessity, graceful, invisible, and exhausting. After tea service, you're caught on the wrong side of the baize door. for 2 seconds too long. A guest is exiting the drawing room, and you're just standing there like a deer in stiff cotton. They don't say anything, but their look is enough. A tilt of the head, a purse of the lips, a silent scolding that you'll remember for hours. You retreat through the door like a criminal back into the servants' hall, where the air is thick with boiling water and the scent of overcooked cabbage. No one here tilts their head at you. They just grunt, nod, and carry on. The cook hands you a basin and tells you to clean the spill in the pantry. You do it quietly. Later, the housekeeper reminds you that the baize door is not a lounge. You nod and say, "Yes, ma'am," and resist the urge to point out that it doesn't have a single place to sit. As night falls, you pass through it one last time, delivering clean towels to the ladies' bathroom. She doesn't notice you. She's adjusting her earrings, the pearls catching the last glint of lamplight. You place the towels on the stand and retreat. You catch your reflection in the hallway mirror on your way out. You look like a painting that is half finished, clean but colourless, present but transparent. You pass back through the baize door, let it shut behind you with a soft click, and feel your shoulders loosen. The other side of the house may be gilded and perfumed, but this side, the smudged, scuffed, worn-in part, is where you actually exist. You return to the scullery, set down your basin, and finally exhale. The door didn't bite you today, but it reminded you exactly who you are. Sunday may be the Sabbath, but for you it's also a reminder that even supposed rest comes laced with rules, starch, and blisters. And church, of course, church is not optional. Not for the family, and therefore not for the help. In fact, while the master and mistress get to glide into their front pew like Victorian royalty, you are expected to trail behind and occupy the cold back rows, all while pretending you aren't limping from yesterday's silver polishing marathon. But today is not just any Sunday, it's one of those Sundays, the ones where the master insists the entire household, every last soul, must attend service in full uniform. Even the scullery boy who once caught fire trying to light a gas lamp and hasn't recovered a full sentence since. You all stand in a line like mismatched ducks, heads down, collars tight, boots cleaned to a fault. There's no joy in it, only performance. You're not there to pray, you're there to be seen praying. The morning starts at a full gallop. The housekeeper's voice is already slicing through the servants' hall before you've even had your first sip of weak tea. Where is the brush for the coat cuffs? Is that hem properly ironed? Don't slouch, girl. This isn't a potato field. You're halfway into your Sunday uniform, that one stiff dress with the too tight bodice and the high collar that makes you feel like a condemned nun. You tug it on anyway. The buttons dig into your spine, and the sleeves squeeze your arms like sausage casing. The church uniforms are somehow worse than the everyday wear. They are supposed to be modest, but really, they're just punitive. And then there's the hat. You don't know who designed this particular disaster, but it's lopsided, smells faintly of mothballs and regret, and has a ribbon that flaps against your cheek as if it's trying to whisper insults directly into your ear. You line up with the others by the back door, waiting for the master's carriage to leave first. You all go second, walking the long gravel path to the village chapel, your shoes kicking up dust that clings to your stockings like powdered judgment. Your posture has to be just so, your expression mild. You can't look too pleased. That would be suspicious. But you can't look too dour either, or people might assume you're not grateful enough for your station. The chapel itself is tiny, old, and smells slightly damp. The pews creak. The air is filled with that special kind of church silence, the kind that judges you before the sermon even begins. You file into the last 2 rows, the wood still warm from the gardener's earlier shift. The priest's sermon begins shortly after, a predictable lecture on humility and obedience. You feel the words roll over you like hot porridge, thick, bland, and mildly painful. "Blessed are the meek," he says. And you want to raise your hand and ask, how meek exactly? Is foot scraping and bell answering meek enough? Or should we be aiming for doormat levels of submission? Here's a fringe fact that might make you sigh into your hymn book. In many large households, servants were monitored during church, not just by the housekeeper or the butler, but by the family themselves. They would keep little mental notes: who sang too loudly, who looked bored, who fidgeted. Once a parlour maid got in trouble for nodding off during the benediction. She claimed it was a migraine. The master claimed she was being disrespectful. She was gone by Thursday. After the final hymn, you file back to the house in silence, your muscles sore from sitting upright on unforgiving wood for an hour straight. You'd love a nap. You'd love to loosen your collar and eat something warm. Instead, you go straight to lunch prep. Just because it's church day doesn't mean the family won't be hungry. They are always hungry, especially after a sermon on self-denial. The cook is already mid-rant when you arrive in the kitchen. She's holding a chicken by the leg and waving it around like a weapon. "This bird is half the size it should be. What am I supposed to serve? Air and feathers?" You don't answer. You just start peeling potatoes. That's your task today. 47 potatoes, all of a uniform size, all without any nicks or bruises. You sit on the edge of a stool, shoulders hunched, and try not to cut your thumb again. Somewhere upstairs, the Baroness is complaining that the bread rolls were too dense yesterday. She has no idea they were baked at 4 in the morning by a girl who hasn't had a day off in 6 weeks. You try not to dwell on it. The more you think, the more bitter you get. And bitterness is not allowed in a house like this, not unless it's in the marmalade. After lunch, the family lounges in the drawing room. You are tasked with Sunday polishing, which is just like Monday polishing, only with more oversight. You kneel by the piano, cloth in hand, moving in circles so precise they could be measured with a compass. The mistress glances over at you once, says nothing, and resumes her knitting. You polish a little faster. Here's a point of contention among historians, whether servants ever got any true rest. Some say Sunday afternoons offered a sacred hour for reading or letter writing. Others argue it was just an illusion, a bit of string dangled in front of a cat to keep it from noticing its cage. From where you are kneeling, it is definitely the latter. There is always something, always someone who needs a handkerchief, or some water, or their hat brushed, or their dog chased out of the pantry. By late afternoon, you are finally allowed to eat. Dinner, if you can call it that, is cold beef from 2 days ago, and a lump of bread that could double as a doorstop. You chew with determination, not because it's tasty, but because it is all you are getting. You hear the scullery boy whisper that his stomach hurts. No one responds. Evening brings candle duty. You check each holder, trim the wicks, replace the melted wax, and relight every room before the family emerges again for their evening tea. It is delicate work. One missed wick, and someone might trip in the hallway and declare it an unforgivable safety hazard. You light the last candle just as the Baroness passes by, her shawl trailing behind her like a bridal train. She doesn't look at you. You look at the flame, willing it to stay lit. You return to the servants' hall just after dusk. Your shoulders ache, your back throbs. You still smell like boiled potatoes and candle grease. You finally loosen your collar and sit down at the far end of the bench. Someone offers you the dregs of the teapot. It's cold, but you sip it anyway. You think back to the sermon. Blessed are the meek. You wonder if meekness comes with any benefits, dental perhaps. Then the hallway bell rings. You stand up, your collar stiff again, back to the front lines. You wake up with a sore throat, not just a tickle, not a dry mouth from the attic air. No, this is the deep, sharp kind of pain that comes with fever and regret. You try to swallow and it feels like you're dragging sandpaper down your windpipe. Your head is throbbing behind your eyes. Your joints ache like you've been trampled by a tea trolley. It's official. You're ill. You lie still for a moment, weighing your options, which is generous of your brain because you don't actually have any. You are not allowed to be sick. You're not even allowed to act sick. You are a servant, not a person. You are an appliance that walks and breathes, and appliances do not get to call in sick. So you get up slowly and carefully. Every single motion makes your body protest. Your muscles are refusing to cooperate, as if they have just now remembered how overworked they've been for the last 3 years. The attic air is cold, and your thin blanket might as well be made of hope and lint. You fumble your way into your uniform, your fingers trembling as you try to button your bodice. You can't quite focus. Your vision swims every time you look down. Your shoes feel like they've shrunk overnight. You tie your apron on crooked, then untie it and start all over again. The second knot comes out even worse. You leave it. There's no time to fuss over symmetry when you're dying on your feet. Downstairs, the kitchen is already alive with the sound of clanging pans and rising steam. The cook barely even glances at you before thrusting a bucket into your hands. "Ash buckets to the yard," she snaps, as if it's not the 5th day in a row. She has handed you the heaviest job before breakfast. You just nod. You carry the bucket out into the chill morning air, your legs shaky, your chest burning. The coal ashes are still warm, and steam rises as you pour them out into the heap behind the scullery. You cough. It sounds terrible, deep, rattling, and wet. You glance around quickly, making sure no one can hear you. If the housekeeper gets wind that you're unwell, she'll either ignore it or assign you double the work as a lesson in not being weak. Here's a fringe fact that would be funny if it weren't your actual life. Some Victorian households kept a second sick room, not for the family, but for ill servants. It sounds compassionate, right? Except it wasn't. These rooms were often unheated, windowless cupboards meant to isolate you so that you wouldn't infect anyone upstairs. If you were too ill to work, but not quite ill enough to die, you were thrown into that icy little purgatory with a crust of bread and the hope that your fever didn't get any worse. You're not sick enough for that yet, but it's coming. You can feel it in your bones. By mid-morning, you are already behind on your tasks. You're moving slower and everything is taking longer. The dusting isn't done, the drawing room fire hasn't been lit, and the bell has rung 3 times and you missed it twice. You expect someone to scold you at any moment. And then, of course, they do. The housekeeper corners you in the hallway, her eyes sharp. "You're pale," she says, as if it's a personal affront. You nod. "Didn't sleep well, Mum," she sniffs. "We've all got problems. Finish the silver before luncheon." She walks off before you can reply, not that you would. Words are precious when your throat feels like it's lined with thorns. You slump into the pantry to polish the silver. The bright metal reflects your flushed face. You look awful. Your cheeks are too red, your eyes too dull. You breathe slowly, trying to keep from coughing all over the family's dinner forks. You take short breaks, pretending to refill the polish just so you can steady yourself against the counter. Someone once told you that working through illness was a kind of noble suffering, that servants built character this way, that it made you resilient. What it really does is make you delirious enough to try lifting the heavy silver tea service with shaking arms and nearly dropping it. You catch it just in time, but the clang echoes through the room. You freeze. No one comes. You exhale. Here's the thing that no one talks about. You can't heal in this job. Not really. Illness just becomes another weight that you have to carry. There is no doctor for you, no warm broth and clean sheets. If the family is kind, you might get an extra lump of sugar in your tea. If they're not, and they usually aren't, you get blamed for moving too slowly, breathing too loudly or looking contagious. And when the family does fall ill, you are expected to tend to them, bring soup, change linens, empty basins, light fires, and somehow not catch it yourself. Or if you do, at least have the courtesy not to look like it. Back in the hallway, you trip slightly on the stairs. Your ankle twists, not badly, but it slows you down even more. The undermaid glances at you with something that looks like pity, or maybe it's disgust. Either way, she just walks on. You don't expect any help. At lunchtime, you don't eat. Your stomach is churning. Even the smell of the stew makes your head spin. You sit on the edge of the bench, your hands in your lap, just staring into space. The scullery boy offers you a half-stale biscuit. You shake your head. He shrugs and eats it himself. The afternoon comes in a blur. You're asked to carry water up to the guest suite. You try. You spill half of it down the front of your dress. The lady's maid rolls her eyes. "Try not to soak the carpet," she snaps, snatching the pitcher from your hands. You sit on the back step for 5 minutes after that, pretending to tie your shoe. You're actually just trying not to faint. The sky is overcast. Your breath fogs in the air. The cold feels like a kindness. The evening is even worse. Dinner prep feels endless. The roast takes forever. The heat from the stove bakes your fever until your scalp prickles. You think about asking the housekeeper for some rest. You picture the look she would give you. You don't ask. Instead, you just finish your chores. You crawl back up to the attic after dark, your dress soaked with sweat, your body trembling. You barely manage to unlace your boots. Your pillow is lumpy. Your blanket feels like burlap, but you don't care. You lie down. Every muscle screams. Your breath wheezes in your chest. You stare at the ceiling. It's flickering with the lamplight from the alley. You wonder how much worse you'll feel tomorrow. Then you cough once, deep, loud and painful. You hear someone stir in the bed across the room. No one says anything. You close your eyes and you hope it passes, because if it doesn't, you're not sure they'll let you stay. You don't expect to be summoned, not directly, not by name. But this morning, the butler appears in the scullery looking like death in a waistcoat and says, "You're wanted upstairs." No explanation, no hint of what you're walking into. He just flicks his eyes toward the stairs and vanishes again, like a bad omen. You're still sick. Not in the dramatic, Victorian fainting on a chaise kind of way, but the heavy glue in your lungs, headache behind your eyes kind of sick. You don't complain. You wipe your hands on your apron, straighten your posture, and climb the stairs slowly, trying not to wheeze loud enough to echo. Whatever this is, you don't want to arrive sounding like a haunted organ. You knock gently on the door of the ladies' sitting room. "Come in," she says, her voice as sharp and cold as ever. Inside, the air smells of perfume and something else, something raw and acrid that curls your stomach. You see the lady seated in her chair, her face pale, her hair only half pinned. Next to her is something wrapped in a blanket on the chaise lounge. A shape, a small one. You freeze. "Take that down to the scullery," she says, gesturing to the bundle. Her voice is clipped. No explanation, no emotion. Quietly, you move forward and see what it is. A baby, barely a few days old by the looks of it. It's not swaddled properly, not wrapped for the cold. A tiny fist is clenched near its cheek, its face red and blotchy, its mouth slack with sleep or something close to it. You pick it up carefully, feeling the weight of it settle in your arms like a question you don't want to answer. The baby makes a sound, not quite a cry, not quite a breath, and you suppress a shiver that has nothing to do with your fever. Mrs. Carroll will take it from there. "Oh," the lady adds, not looking at you now. "Be discreet." Discreet. The word hovers in the air like incense. You carry the bundle down the back stairs, each step careful and deliberate. The baby's face is pressed against your shoulder, warm and oddly silent. You don't look at it again. You don't want to see too much, learn too much, or think too much. In the scullery, Mrs. Carroll is waiting. She's not usually here. She works in the village, a midwife mostly, and occasionally something else. She nods at you, takes the child, and disappears out the servant door without a word. You just stand there, your arms suddenly empty, unsure if you've just done something terrible or something kind. You go back to polishing silver like nothing ever happened. Here is the truth that no one says aloud. Babies appear and disappear in houses like this quietly, behind curtains and under blankets. Sometimes you hear a late-night cry from a guest room where no guest is listed. Sometimes a chambermaid misses a week of duty and then returns, thinner and quieter. The other girls say nothing. The housekeeper certainly says nothing. And eventually neither do you. There's a fringe fact you once overheard. Some grand homes had entire wings designed to hide delicate matters. Secret backstairs, hidden chambers, even private birthing rooms with access only for the family doctor and whichever poor servant had the nerve to assist. The goal wasn't secrecy for its own sake, it was reputation. Reputation, that glittering god you all have to bow to. There is debate, too, among scholars. Some say such arrangements were acts of compassion, a way to quietly resolve accidents without scandal. Others argue it was exploitation layered under silk and lace, trapping women with no real agency, and blaming the help when consequences arose. You don't know which side is right. You just know that no one cared what the servant thought. Later in the kitchen, the cook says nothing when you enter, but her eyes flick briefly to your face, then away. She knows, of course she does. Everyone knows eventually. The whole house just hums with things left unsaid. You return to your duties. There are dishes to scrub, floors to mop, windows to polish. No one asks you how you are feeling. No one asks if you're okay. They wouldn't even if you were bleeding from the ears. You're just the help. If you look shaken, they'll say you're being dramatic. If you cry, you'll be told to do it on your own time, not the household's. And you do want to cry, if you're being honest. Not because of the baby, exactly, but because of what it represents, the quiet tragedies that hover beneath this entire house, the way grief gets tucked into drawers and sealed behind smiles, the way responsibility trickles downward like spilled wine, staining only the servants who dared to be nearby. Around midday, the lady's bell rings again. You answer it with calm hands and tired eyes. She is sitting by the window this time, perfectly composed, a plate of untouched toast on her lap. "Have the nursery linens changed?" she says, still not looking at you. "The room is no longer needed." You nod. You descend the stairs and pass through the servant hallway like a ghost. You don't say a word to the other girls, though they are looking at you now with that particular kind of awareness, the one that says, "I know what you carried, and thank God it wasn't me." You strip the nursery sheets slowly, gently, folding each one as if they might still hold something fragile. The cradle is empty. The rocking chair still moves slightly as if someone just rose from it. The air smells of lavender water and milk, and you pause, let yourself breathe. Then you carry the linens down to the wash. Back in the servants' hall, the butler passes you without a glance. The housekeeper does the same. It's as though the morning never happened. But you can still feel it in your arms, in your bones, a lingering weight that hasn't quite let go. That night, while brushing the ashes from the front parlour fireplace, you catch your reflection in the polished brass fender. Your face is pale, your eyes are sunken, but you look calm. You've learned that everything here is seen, and nothing is ever spoken. You've never belonged upstairs, but the truth is, you don't really belong downstairs either. You exist somewhere in between, floating just outside the lines that have been drawn so carefully by people who have never had to clean a fireplace with a toothbrush or carry a bucket of waste down 3 flights of stairs. You're too polished to be considered poor, too invisible to be respected. And tonight, for reasons you can't quite name, that truth sits a little heavier than usual. It begins with a visit from the lady's cousin. Not the Baroness, she has thankfully gone, trailing perfume and judgment behind her, but a younger man this time, a Mr. Halliday. He's well-dressed, well-mannered, and unfortunately very aware of how his presence makes the help nervous. You serve him tea in the drawing room and catch his eyes on you for 1 beat too long. He smiles, that too long kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes and feels like a hook being lowered into your skin. You say nothing. You leave the tray. You back out of the room with your eyes lowered, your heart quickening like a rabbit's. Back in the scullery, the other girls are talking about him softly, carefully. One of them calls him charming, another calls him dangerous. You just sit quietly, polishing a silver spoon until your fingers ache. You don't add to the conversation. You know better. That night, as you're gathering laundry from the guest wing, you run into him, alone. You hear his boots before you see him. You try to duck into the linen closet, but he sees you. He says something innocuous, a comment about the chill in the hall. You nod politely, clutching the towels tighter. He steps closer and says something else, something about how quiet the house is this time of evening. You try to smile without encouraging him. You sidestep, mutter an excuse, and disappear down the servant stairs as quickly as your dignity will allow. Nothing happened, technically. He didn't touch you, he didn't say anything overt, but you felt it. That shift in the air, that knowledge, that careful balancing act between standing your ground and not making waves. If you complain, they'll say you imagined it. If you avoid him, they'll say you're being rude. You are a servant. You're supposed to be agreeable but never inviting, silent but never secretive, present but never visible. It's a tightrope with no net. Later, while you're folding sheets, you think about where you exist in this world. You're not like the maids who came from farming families, all rough and blunt and used to the cold. You've lived with lace and porcelain for years now. You know which fork is for the fish. You can read. You even speak a little French, courtesy of that one governess who was too lonely to keep her language to herself. You know how to carry a tray without clinking the cups. You know how to keep your face smooth, your tones soft, your steps silent, but none of that makes you one of them. Still, you don't quite belong with the housemaids either. You don't smoke behind the coal shed. You don't flirt with the footman. You don't sneak wine from the cellar. As tempting as it is, they think you're proper or cold or both. And so you just drift, respected but not liked, trusted but not included. You've built a life out of being in between. There's a fringe fact from some journal you once dusted. In larger houses, certain senior servants were discouraged from mingling too much with the lower staff. Too familiar, they'd say, too casual. You couldn't be part of the family, and you couldn't really be part of the staff. So where did that leave you? Exactly where you are now. Folding sheets in silence, while the kitchen buzzes with activity and the drawing room fills with laughter. You'll never join. Scholars sometimes write about the servant class as if it were a monolith, hundreds of thousands of girls and boys, all laboring under the exact same conditions. But the truth is, you all live different versions of the same captivity. Some rose through the ranks, others married out, a few escaped to the colonies. But most just stayed, got older, slower, and were eventually replaced. You once asked the housekeeper what happens to servants who age out. They become cautionary tales, she said, sipping her tea. Tonight, your cautionary tale is Margaret, the the former under-housemaid. She was here when you first arrived, quick, competent, and proud. Then she twisted her ankle on the stairs, couldn't keep up, got demoted to laundry, started coughing, and was gone by Christmas. No one ever said where she went. You still remember her face sometimes, sharp cheekbones, a quiet laugh that just vanished like a plot twist no one was ready for. After the sheets, you help with the evening fire rounds. The drawing room is still warm from earlier, but you stoke the fire anyway. The logs catch slowly, crackling in the grate. You stand there for a moment too long, just letting the heat kiss your cheeks. The room is empty. Just for a second you pretend it's yours. You walk through the green baize door again, returning to the world of slate floors and tepid broth. The other girls are setting the table for your supper, cold meat and potatoes. One of them asks if you're all right. You just nod. She squints. You're flushed. Just warm from the fire, you say. She nods but doesn't quite believe you. No one ever really does. You eat quickly, mechanically. No one talks much tonight. The footman tried to kiss the laundry maid behind the stables and got slapped for his trouble. The kitchen maid is nursing a burn. The scullery boy hasn't spoken in 2 days and no one has asked him why. Everyone is tired. Everyone is just surviving. When supper ends, you scrub the table, check the pantry locks and climb the attic stairs to your bed. You change in the dark. You lie awake for an hour, just staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. You don't know what you're waiting for. Sleep, maybe, or for something to change, but nothing will. Not here and not for you. You are too proper for pity, too poor for protection, too visible to ignore, and too invisible to remember. The cold seeps in long before the morning does. It starts in your toes, already curled beneath your threadbare stockings, and climbs up into your knees, your spine, the very back of your neck. You're not just shivering, you're brittle, the kind of cold that makes you wonder if you're still breathing because your breath no longer mists in the air. It's winter now, the real kind, a Victorian winter. No central heating, no double glazing, no warm up the car before work, just stone floors, cracked windows, and a household that somehow demands even more from you when your fingers can barely move. You rise before dawn. You can't see anything in the attic but shapes, but that doesn't matter. You've done this routine so many times that your body moves without needing sight. You pull on your stiffest dress, the only one thick enough to count as winter, appropriate, and wrap your shawl around your shoulders 3 times. It's still not enough. You can see your own breath. You can feel the air inside your chest, scraping against your ribs, but you go downstairs anyway. The hallway is darker than usual. The lamps were left off to conserve gas, and the fire has yet to be lit. You carry a box of kindling to the hearth like it's an offering, kneel down, and get to work. Your fingers fumble with the match, once, twice, and finally, a spark. The flame flares weakly, licking at the paper, and then dies. You try again. Lighting a fire sounds simple until you're doing it with hands so numb they feel like they belong to someone else. Your fingers don't bend right. Your sleeves keep falling into your face. You hunch lower, your nose nearly in the soot, trying to breathe warmth into something that doesn't want to catch. Finally it does. The fire crackles half-heartedly. You add some coal. The room glows just enough to confirm how miserable you look in the brass fender's reflection. You have to light 3 more fires before the household even wakes up. Each one leaves you a little blacker around the wrists and a little more chilled in the bones. No one ever thanks you. They just expect the fires to exist. Comfort in this house must always appear effortless. Here's your quirky fringe fact of the day. In larger households, there were sometimes dedicated fireboys, young lads whose sole job was to light, stoke and maintain every single hearth. They would crawl out of bed at 3 in the morning, and spend hours lugging coal and coaxing flames into existence. You, being of the wrong gender and the wrong age, don't get that title, but you still get the job. As the sun begins to rise, a pale, cold shrug of a sun that doesn't really care, the master's bell rings. Of course it does. You leave the fire half done and rush upstairs, your boots clunking against the stone steps. He wants hot water for shaving, always hot water. You fill the kettle and carry it up, the metal biting into your raw fingers. The kettle sloshes. One spill and you'll scald your skirt again. You knock, you enter. He barely glances up, just gestures to the basin like he's directing a particularly clumsy ghost. You pour the water, the steam rises, you hold your breath, you curtsy, you leave. The corridor is colder than the room was, of course it is. You pull your shawl tighter, it smells like smoke and old soap. You make your way back downstairs, breakfast prep is already underway. The cook is swearing, the bacon won't get crisp, the eggs are frozen solid. You're asked to fetch more firewood from the shed. You try not to groan. The shed is a walk across the courtyard with no cover from the wind, which feels like a slap to the face. You trudge outside, your breath fogging, your apron flapping behind you like a torn flag. The sky is grey, your boots crunch on the frost. The shed door is stuck, frozen in place. You have to kick it. It creaks open as if it's in pain. Inside there's wood, dry, splintery, and somehow even colder than the air. You gather an armful. It digs into your skin. A splinter wedges itself under your nail. You curse under your breath, and then curse yourself for cursing. You head back inside, clutching the firewood like it's a baby made of punishment. By midday, your fingers have stopped bleeding, but they haven't stopped hurting. The skin around your knuckles is cracked. You apply some tallow when no one is looking. It stinks, but it works somewhat. You've seen what happens when frostbite sets in. Last year, the stable boy lost 2 of his toes. Poor circulation, they said. Poor gloves is what they meant. There is a scholarly debate over just how dire the winter conditions were for domestic staff. Some records show that servants had decent coal allowances and occasional warm drinks. Others describe frost-covered pillows, chilblains, and permanent respiratory damage from sleeping in unheated attics. Your version definitely leans toward the latter. Your breath fogs the air inside your own bedroom. Your bed is damp. Your toes haven't thawed out since November. You eat your lunch in silence, cold beef again, cold bread, cold tea. Your jaw aches from chewing. You miss warmth more than anything else. Not hot baths or big fireplaces, just simple warmth, a scarf that doesn't itch, a chair that's not drafty, a room that doesn't feel like a punishment. The afternoon brings the laundry. Again, of course. This time, you're asked to help hang sheets out in the yard. You nod and follow the instructions, even though the idea of wet linen in this weather feels like a crime. The steam from the laundry tub is the only heat you've known all day. It clings to your face for just a moment, then vanishes as the wind slices through. You haul the heavy basket out to the yard, your teeth chattering, your fingers stiff. The sheets are heavy. They slap in the wind like angry flags. You pin them up with frozen fingers, trying to keep the cloth from whipping you in the face. One sheet snaps free and lands in a puddle. You don't cry, you just pick it up, sling it over your shoulder, and carry it back to be rewashed. The housekeeper will call you careless. You will say nothing. As night falls, the cold sharpens. You light the evening fires again. You do it faster now, almost expertly. You've learned which rooms have the most stubborn grates, which logs burn the best, and which pokers won't bite your hands. You finish up in the drawing room just before the lady enters. She nods. That's all. A single nod. You take it like it's a gold medal. Back in the attic, you peel off your dress. Your skin is pale and blotchy. You rub your arms, trying to coax some feeling back into them. Your hands are shaking, your knees are knocking. You crawl into bed, pulling the blanket all the way up to your chin. tucking your feet into your skirts to try and warm them. Sleep doesn't come quickly. It is too cold. You just lie there, your teeth clenched, staring into the dark. Somewhere outside, a branch snaps under the weight of the frost. You close your eyes and pray for spring. You swear it starts as a draft, just a whisper of cold air that trickles along the floorboards and brushes against your ankles when you pass by the linen press. You pause, look around, and feel the hair rise on the back of your neck. But there's no one there. Just the usual dim hallway, the soft hiss of the gas lamp, and the comforting smell of starch and beeswax. Still, the air has changed. It feels like it's watching you. Later, while delivering hot water to the blue guest room, you feel it again. That sense that something is in the room with you. Not a person, not even quite a presence. Just a prickling stillness, like someone just breathed down your collar and then stepped out of reach. You glance over your shoulder. The room is empty, silent. The fire has burned down to low embers. The air smells faintly of lavender and something even fainter still, dust and rosewater and something older, something sour. You leave the pitcher on the washstand and back out of the room quickly. There's a reason that no one likes the blue guest room. They'll tell you it's because the windows rattle and the floorboards slope, but that's not it. Not really. The truth is, the servants have been whispering about that room for years. Not always openly. No one wants a reputation for being superstitious. But you've heard the muttered prayers, the nervous glances, the excuse-making, when someone is told to go and turn down the bed. The cook calls it bad air. The housemaid says it's the wallpaper. The undermaid won't set foot inside the room after sunset. You didn't believe in ghosts before you took this job. Now you're not so sure. Back in the attic that night, Annie brings it up without even being asked. You feel it today? She whispers across the narrow space between your beds. Her voice is careful, like a match being held too close to a curtain. You nod. She shivers under her blanket. Happens every year around this time. You ask her why, though you're not sure you actually want the answer. She hesitates. There was a girl years ago, a scullery maid, I think. Got locked in the linen cupboard by accident, they say. Or maybe not. They found her 3 days later, cold and quiet. And you blink? You've passed that same cupboard a dozen times this week. Annie continues, her voice barely audible now. The blue guest room used to be hers. They moved her out when she started talking to people who weren't there. You lie still for a long time after that. Here's a historical tidbit for your troubles. Victorian servants were notoriously superstitious, especially those who worked long hours alone in cellars, attics, or cold pantries. You spend enough time in silence, surrounded by shadows, and the weight of a house breathing around you. And you'll start to feel things too. Many houses even kept a clergyman on speed dial, not for the family's spiritual well-being, but to bless a nursery that felt wrong, or to say prayers in a room where no one ever slept properly. There's some scholarly debate, of course. Some argue these tales were just invented by the staff to explain away their exhaustion and mental strain. Others say they were quietly accepted by the households themselves. After all, even the upper class had their own ghost stories and their own reasons for keeping certain doors locked. The next day, it escalates. You're in the dining room, polishing the sideboard before lunch. It's early, so no one else is about. The light coming through the windows is watery and thin. And then, very softly, you hear a hum, a tune coming from the hallway. You stop and listen. It's a lullaby, a familiar one, something you've heard before but can't quite place. And it's wrong, too slow, too flat, the kind of sound that drags against your spine like fingernails. You step out into the hallway. It's empty. The tune stops. You return to your polishing with your heart in your throat. Later that day, the nursery maid mentions the same thing. Someone was humming outside the door this morning. she says absently while peeling an apple in the scullery. I thought it was the governess, but she hadn't come down yet. You share a look. You don't talk about it again. That night, a tray goes missing. You swear you left it on the table beside the stairs. The undermaid confirmed that she saw it too. But when you go back, it's gone. You search everywhere, behind curtains, under furniture, nothing. It turns up the next morning on the third-floor landing, neatly placed, untouched, and perfectly clean. No one claims to have moved it. The cook calls it mischief. The housekeeper calls it laziness. You just call it what it is, unsettling. Here's a fringe detail pulled from a servant's diary you once glimpsed while cleaning the butler's pantry. Some homes, especially the older ones, had a bad room. A room that no one ever slept in, that no one entered unless it was absolutely necessary. The door was kept locked, the windows were kept closed, and the fire was left cold. No one ever admitted why, but everyone knew. You're starting to think the blue guest room is your house's bad room. By the end of the week, no one wants to take that hallway duty. The linen closet door creaks even when it's closed. The mirror on the landing has a smudge that won't wipe off, shaped almost like a handprint. And the gas lamp near the guest room flickers even though all the rest stays steady. The butler claims it's just the wind. You stop questioning it. You're cleaning the parlour one evening just before supper. It's quiet, peaceful even. The fire is crackling gently. The curtains are drawn. Then the door creaks open behind you. You assume it's the housemaid. You turn around. No one is there. Just the empty hallway and the faint scent of lavender water. You close the door, lock it, finish your work with quick hands and get back to the wall. That night, when you climb into bed, you pull the blanket up, higher than usual. The wind is howling outside. The attic groans like it's trying to stretch. You hear footsteps on the servant stairs, too slow, too heavy, too far past curfew. You tell yourself it's just someone else, just another servant. You close your eyes. The hum starts again. This time, it's closer. It's not in the rules. You've read them. Well, the ones that are posted in the servants' hall, next to the tea shelf that's stained with soot and sticky fingerprints. Nowhere does it say that you can't fall in love, but everyone knows that you're not supposed to. Not with anyone inside this house. Not with another servant, and certainly not with someone from upstairs. Love is a luxury, and you don't get those here. Still, it happens. It starts small, the way all dangerous things do. A shared glance, a whispered joke, a sleeve brushed in a narrow hallway, a borrowed pencil. You and Thomas, one of the second footmen, you're not even sure how it all began, only that it did. And now, every time you pass each other in the corridor or share a word while polishing the sconces outside the study, something electric skitters under your skin. You tell yourself it's harmless, you're being careful, you keep your distance when others are near. You don't linger in the pantry, you don't stand too close at dinner, but still there's something there, a warmth, a sliver of something private in a life where absolutely nothing belongs to you. And today, it turns just a little. You're out in the laundry yard, hanging up sheets. Your hands are red raw from the cold, your breath puffing out in clouds. And Thomas appears behind you with a basket of kitchen linens. No one else is around. He sets the basket down and says quietly, "You missed breakfast." You blink. "I overslept?" He hands you a crust of bread that has already been buttered. You don't take it at first. You just look at him. He shrugs. "I saved it for you." It's a small thing, just bread and butter, but it's also enormous. You eat it in silence. He hangs towels beside you. For 5 minutes, the world just slows down. The wind whips the sheets into sails. The sky stays pale and wide, and no one calls your name. For 5 minutes, you forget about your aching back and your blistered palms, and the fact that falling for someone like him could get you both dismissed. There's a strange little fringe fact for you. In some households, servants weren't even allowed to speak to one another outside of their specific duties. If two of them were caught talking in the corridor, it could be considered loitering, or worse, gossip. Affection was seen as a direct threat to discipline. Emotions were distractions. Attachments bred rebellion. You've read the stories. Maids fired for lingering glances, kitchen boys sent away for slipping notes under napkin stacks. The housekeeper once told you about a parlour maid who eloped with a groom. "Ran off with the silver," she said grimly, though you suspect it was only her dignity she took. After your bread and butter moment, you're extra careful. You return to your duties with a renewed sense of urgency, scouring the stair rail until your knuckles shine. But your mind is somewhere else. It keeps replaying his face in the cold, his awkward smile, the way his eyes lingered just long enough to feel like an invitation. You run into him again that evening, on the back staircase, while you're delivering tea trays. He's coming down with a coat draped over one arm, still in his livery. The stairwell is narrow, you have to pass close. He doesn't touch you, but he looks at you, and he says your name, softly. You both freeze, just for a second. Then the footman behind him calls out, "Thomas!" and the moment fractures. He nods once and keeps walking. You do too. Upstairs, the lady of the house is waiting for her tea. She asks for lemon, she asks for her shawl. She doesn't look at you. You deliver everything with a mechanical grace. Your heart is still racing. There is no privacy in love here. Every single glance is a risk. Every word might be overheard. And even if no one catches you, everyone is watching. The house breathes gossip. The undercook already suspects something. The scullery maid gave you a look at dinner that you didn't know how to answer. Later that night, the housekeeper stops you in the corridor. Her voice is smooth, but her eyes are sharp. "Keep to your station," she says. No explanation, no context. You just nod. "Yes, ma'am." She walks away. You lie in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. The attic creaks. The others are sleeping. Your stomach is hollow, not from hunger, but from the weight of possibility. What happens if someone finds out? Would they separate you, send him to another house, keep you and dismiss him? Or worse, would they call you the seductress? You are a servant, but you're still a girl. And in this house, a girl with feelings is dangerous. A girl with visible feelings is expendable. Some historians say that relationships between servants were common and even tolerated so long as discretion was maintained. Others suggest that households saw romance among the staff as a breeding ground for scandal and cracked down on it accordingly. The reality probably sat somewhere in between, tolerated until it wasn't, ignored until it was inconvenient. You're not sure where you fall just yet. A few nights later, Thomas leaves a folded scrap of paper near the broom cupboard. You spot it while you're fetching coal. It's a page torn from a ledger, scribbled on in pencil. "Be in the garden after the bells." You burn the note immediately. But that night, you slip outside, just once, just long enough to feel the moonlight on your hands and his fingers brushing against yours. You don't speak. You just stand there. Two servants, two ghosts, caught in a world where love isn't forbidden, it's simply erased. You stay for 5 minutes. You return to the kitchen before anyone notices. You sleep with a smile on your face for the first time in months. But when you wake up, you know it can't last. Love here is fragile. It's a secret carried in a coal scuttle, a whisper behind the baize door, a risk wrapped in silence. And you've just taken it. There's a particular look that servants give each other when something is off. Not broken, not missing, not spilled, just off. Like the kitchen door that swings open a little too quietly, or a tea tray that arrives before it's been called for, or the housekeeper smiling. That's what happens today. The housekeeper smiles. It's wide, too wide, and it puts everyone on edge. She's smiling like something has already been decided and no one has told you what it is yet. By midday, you know why. Miss Allerton, the master's elder sister, has arrived, unannounced. She is always unannounced. She is the kind of guest who makes everyone scramble and drop things. She glides into the parlour, wrapped in black bombazine and brimstone, her umbrella clicking on the floor like a metronome of doom. She doesn't visit often, but when she does, the walls seem to tighten around you, as if they're preparing for something explosive. You remember her last visit? Someone was fired for laughing too loud. This time it's worse, because this time she has taken a liking to the soup. At dinner, you're standing in the corner of the dining room, hands folded, face neutral, just listening to the sound of silver scraping across porcelain. She puts her spoon down, dabs at her lips and says, "That soup was divine. I could kiss the cook." The room goes still. The cook, of course, is in the kitchen, sweating through her apron and shouting at the scullery boy to stop peeling the potatoes like they owe him money. She will never hear the compliment, but the butler hears it and the lady of the house hears it, and you, God help you, you smile. Just a flicker, a twitch, not even a full smile. It's a micro-expression of irony, because you know the soup was actually burned on the bottom and masked with too much pepper. Miss Allerton catches it. She says nothing. She just looks at you. Not a hard glare, not even a frown, just a look, clinical, as if she's mentally rearranging the furniture and deciding whether you go with the drapes. You school your face immediately, blank, blank. But it's too late. The next morning, the house is buzzing with a tense, controlled energy. Everyone is quieter. The bells ring more often. The lady snaps about the drawing room carpet. The master mutters something about his sister overstaying her welcome. But Miss Allerton is still here, and she has requested a personal servant for the morning. Just a girl, she says. Someone neat and intelligent. The housekeeper picks you. Of course she does. You arrive outside Miss Allerton's room, your hands clenched in your apron. You knock. Enter. She is seated at the vanity, her hair unpinned, one stocking only halfway on. The dog, an impossibly fluffy Pomeranian named Plum, is gnawing on something under the chaise. It looks like a glove. "Brush this," she says, gesturing to her hair. No greeting? No thanks, you do it. "Fetch my scarf." You do that too. She doesn't speak for a while, just lets you stand there, your hands clasped. Then she says, without turning around, "You're the one with the clever eyes." You freeze. "Pardon, ma'am?" "I saw you smile at dinner." You don't answer. Servants are not supposed to smile unless they're spoken to. She says, still calm, still even. It looks presumptuous, as if you have thoughts. You swallow. "Apologies, ma'am." She finally turns, fixing you with a stare so sharp it could peel an orange. You do have thoughts, though, don't you? You say nothing. She leans a little closer. That can be a problem. Then she dismisses you with a wave. No yelling, no threat, just a dismissal so final it leaves a ringing in your ears. You flee down the stairs, your heart pounding. Your apron is damp with sweat. You don't remember half the steps. In the kitchen, the cook looks up, sees your face, and hands you a rag to squeeze. No questions, just a shared understanding. That evening, the lady of the house asks for her tea earlier than usual. You prepare it, but when you enter the drawing room, Miss Allerton is already there. She watches you pour, doesn't say a single word. The lady makes little conversation about the weather. You don't breathe until you are out of the room. Back in the scullery, Thomas finds you elbow deep in soap. You don't see him at first. You're too busy scrubbing a pan as if it has personally offended you. "You all right?" he asks gently. You nod, not looking up. "She said something, didn't she?" You nod again. He leans against the doorway, his eyes scanning you, then says, almost to himself, "You ever think about leaving?" You stop scrubbing. Your heart stutters. He doesn't wait for an answer. He just pushes off the doorframe. "I do. You don't sleep that night." "Not much." You keep thinking about her voice, that eerie calm, the way she looked at you, as if she were reading a story that hadn't ended yet. You wonder if she'll say something to the lady, or worse, to the master or the housekeeper. You keep remembering that one line that can be a problem. Here's a historical curiosity for you. While Victorian households had strict chains of command, a powerful guest could disrupt everything. A single comment from the right aristocrat could get a servant fired, relocated, or worse, blacklisted. A guest's word in many cases outweighed years of loyalty, especially if they were family. There is scholarly disagreement about how often guests meddled in household matters. Some records suggest it was rare, others show letters between mistresses, swapping observations about their staff like they were recipe tips. You suspect the truth is this: no one really meddled until it was entertaining. The next morning, the housekeeper pulls you aside. "You'll be reassigned to the laundry for the week," she says simply. "Miss Alatine prefers someone else for her rooms." You nod. You don't argue. You just say, "Yes, ma'am," and walk to the laundry room. Thomas is there, folding towels, and you don't speak, but he passes you a cloth, his fingers brushing against yours for half a second longer than they need to. That night, you dream of her voice again, the look, the question. You do have thoughts, don't you? You do. And now they're dangerous. The laundry room is its own kind of punishment. It's hot in the summer, freezing in the winter, and always damp enough to make your bones feel like they have grown moss. The air is thick with steam. The floor is slick with soapy water that never quite evaporates. Everything smells of starch, sweat, and scorched cotton. There is no view, no breeze, just a single high window that is stained with decades of fog and a rusting rack that wobbles whenever you hang too many petticoats on it. You have been reassigned here for the week, but everyone knows what that really means. It is a demotion, a silent punishment. It's not enough to dismiss you outright, but it is enough to remind you that you are replaceable. You don't mind the work itself. It is honest. It is almost private. But the timing of it makes it sting. Miss Alatine's smile did this to you. A twitch of your mouth. That was all it took. Still, you show up on time. You roll up your sleeves. You plunge your hands into boiling water, even when it bites at your raw knuckles and makes you hiss under your breath. You scrub until your arms ache, wring out linen that feels heavier than your own body, and hang up skirts so stiff with starch that they creak when you fold them. The other laundry girl, Millie, doesn't say much. She is squat, silent, and probably hasn't smiled since Victoria's coronation, but she is quick and efficient. She doesn't ask any questions. You both just fall into a rhythm. Scrub, rinse, twist, hang. The silence between you is almost companionable until Millie says, without looking up, "You upset her, didn't you?" You pause mid-fold. "Who?" She shrugs. "One of them. It doesn't matter which. They get bored. They look for trouble. Sometimes they find it. You don't respond. There is nothing to say. Here's a small, cold fringe detail for you. Laundresses were often kept apart from the rest of the staff. They were considered too sweaty, too noisy, too rough on the hands. And because of the chemicals they used, alkaline lye, boiling soda, bluing agents. Their skin would chap, crack, and in some cases rot. One diary mentioned a laundress whose hands were eaten down to the bone. You look at your own hands, raw and swollen, and you understand exactly what she meant. No one ever visits the laundry room unless they absolutely have to. You don't see Thomas. You barely even see the housekeeper. You eat at a different table now, closer to the scullery and farther from the fire. It is quieter there, lonelier. The footman who usually winks at you doesn't meet your eyes anymore. The undermaid who used to lend you hairpins now mutters about upstarts. You don't blame them. You know the rules. You just forgot for a moment that smiles are not free. And yet, in the isolation, there is a strange kind of relief. There are no eyes on you, no bells, no stairs, no trays, just laundry, endless and repetitive, punishing but honest. You work until your back screams and your knees swell. You dream about towels that fold themselves. You can hear the hiss of the mangle in your sleep. On Thursday, you nearly fall asleep standing up. You drop a blouse in the rinse bucket and just stare at it for a full minute, too tired to even fish it out. Millie notices. She hands you a tin mug of lukewarm tea. "Don't fall in," she says. That is the closest she has come to kindness all week. On Friday morning, you wake up with blood on your fingertips. The cracks in your skin have split open during the night. You wrap your hands in muslin and you keep going. That afternoon, something unexpected happens. The housekeeper calls you to her office. You arrive with your sleeves still damp and your apron stained, and you wait to be told that you're being dismissed. But she just says, "The lady wants you back upstairs tomorrow. Miss Allerton's gone." That's it. No apology, no explanation. Just a flick of the wrist and your life is unpaused. You nod, you say, "Yes, ma'am." Back in the laundry, you scrub even harder, not out of spite, but out of clarity. If you're going to re-enter that world, you want to do it on your own terms, quiet, clean, and controlled. Millie doesn't say goodbye the next day, but she does toss you a bar of lye soap. "Best for collars," she says. You thank her. You actually mean it. The next morning, you put your uniform back on like it's a suit of armor. The good one, the crisp apron, the smooth hem. You tie your hair just right. You clean under your nails with a sewing pin and scrub your face until your cheeks sting. You look into the mirror above the scullery sink and you tell yourself that you are ready. The drawing room smells of violets again. The lamps are bright. The bell pulls are back in motion. You re-enter the house's bloodstream like a red cell that never should have wandered off. You move silently, perfectly. No smiles, no glances. Miss Allerton's perfume still clings to the air like a ghost, but she is gone. Thomas finds you by the stairwell. He doesn't say anything, just lifts a brow and tilts his head as if he's asking, "You all right?" You just nod. That night, you'd light the drawing room fire again, same as always. You dust the mantel. You fluff the cushions. You straighten the piano stool even though no one has touched it in weeks. Then you catch your reflection in the glass again. Your face looks the same. Your posture too. But something inside you has locked down a little tighter. Not colder, not harder, just quieter. Some historians say that Victorian servants lacked agency. Others argue that they were the silent gears that ran the entire machine, and they knew it. You're not sure either side gets it exactly right. What you do know is this: you can survive a laundry room, you can survive a smile, you can survive being reminded of your place, and now you'll make damn sure no one forgets it. It's a strange thing, returning to the upstairs corridors as if nothing ever happened. You glide past the green baize door with your tray, the tea perfectly balanced, your posture iron straight, and not a single soul comments on your absence. No raised eyebrows, no side glances, not even a whisper. It's as if the week in the laundry room never existed, and somehow that is worse than if they had sneered at you. You are a ghost again, and this time you're doing your haunting with extra precision. You remember what it felt like to be noticed, just barely. A look here, a nod there. Now you're back to your natural state. Furniture that breathes. The lady of the house calls for tea in the morning room. You bring it, of course, the way you always have. She doesn't look up from her embroidery, just says, "Place it there," and keeps on stitching. Plum, the Pomeranian, growls lowly from under the settee, as if he, too, remembers the laundry and is unimpressed with your return. You set the tray down carefully. The china doesn't rattle. The sugar bowl is precisely centered. You turn to go, but leave the door open, the lady says, still not looking at you. It's stuffy. You leave it open. As you pass through the hallway, you hear her sigh. Not loudly, not theatrically, just a breath, but one that says, things are still not quite right. Still no complaints, not yet. The house is holding its breath. It is around this time that the new girl arrives. She is tiny, barely 15, if that, and so thin she looks like she might fold in half if the wind catches her wrong. Her name is Elsie. She's from Kent, or maybe Sussex. She doesn't quite know where. She doesn't say much either. Her eyes are too wide, her apron is too clean, and her hands shake whenever she tries to carry more than 2 teacups at a time. They assign her to assist in the kitchens and to shadow you upstairs, which you suspect is just code for watch what the older one does and try not to ruin anything. You try to be kind. You remember what it felt like in that first month, the weight of the expectations, the brutal learning curve, the way even the lamps seem to glare at you. But Elsie isn't ready. She flinches every single time someone speaks to her. She drops things. She gets in the way. And worst of all, she asks questions. Questions about what she's supposed to do, about when she will get a half day off, about whether she's allowed to write letters home. You don't answer most of them. You don't have the heart to. One day, as you're both folding table linens in the back pantry, she asks you softly, as if she's just asking where the salt is, "Do you think they notice us?" You blink. Who? She gestures upward toward the ceiling, toward them. You hesitate. Sometimes, you say, which is kinder than the truth. She thinks for a moment. I thought maybe they'd ask my name. You don't tell her that they won't. Not unless you break something, or save someone, or die in front of them with a note pinned to your chest. You just nod and return to your folding. Later that week, she cries. Not loudly, just a quiet leak of tears down her cheeks in the kitchen hallway after she gets shouted at for overfilling the coal scuttle. You hand her a rag. She sniffs, mutters an apology, and asks if she's going to get sacked. You tell her no. You don't know if that's true. That evening, you find yourself standing outside the linen cupboard, the one by the blue guest room, the one that no one likes, the one from Annie's story. The door is closed, it always is, but tonight something compels you to try the handle. It's unlocked. You open it slowly, expecting darkness, but there's a light inside, just a sliver from the crack under the adjacent window. The shelves are neat, the folded sheets are clean. There is no trace of any ghosts, no eerie chill, but you feel something. Not a presence, just a memory pressing in. You think of Elsie asking if anyone sees her. You think of yourself at her age, trying to carry a tray without dropping it, biting your tongue raw whenever someone criticized your knot work, or your dusting, or the attitude in your silence. You close the door again, carefully and respectfully. Here's a fringe tidbit for your consideration. In some grand houses, the senior maids were responsible for training the juniors. But there were no formal guides, no lessons, just observation and imitation, and consequences when it all went wrong. Sometimes the younger girls got lucky. Sometimes they got eaten alive. There is a scholarly argument that the class system worked best when the lower ranks reinforced it among themselves, the idea being that if you keep the younger ones in line, you don't have to challenge the ones above you. It's efficient, cruel, and sometimes true. You think of that when the housekeeper tells you that Elsie needs hardening, and you nod as if you agree. But when you find her again, this time in the scullery, hunched over a chipped teacup and holding her elbow as if it hurts, you sit down beside her. You don't say much. You don't tell her that it gets easier because it doesn't really. You just say, "It gets manageable." She wipes her face. "I want to go home." You nod. We all do. That night, you find an old pair of wool gloves in your trunk. They're too small for you now, but they're still warm. You place them in her bunk and say nothing. The next day, she wears them without a word, and you both carry the tea trays with steady hands. She still flinches, she still asks questions, but less often now. You watch her learn the steps just like you did. You wonder how long it will take before she forgets what warmth felt like. It begins with a cart. Not a carriage, not a coach, just a low wooden cart drawn by a tired-looking horse and driven by a man with a beard that looks like it was grown out of stubbornness rather than style. The cart clatters down the gravel path to the kitchen entrance just after noon, and the cook clicks her tongue as she spots it through the window. "That'll be the lard," she mutters, but you know better. That cart means more than just lard. It means supplies, it means letters, it means news. You're chopping root vegetables, the knife rhythmic against the board, the smell of onion stinging your eyes when it happens. A voice at the kitchen door, deep and as rough as a quarry wall, calls out, "Post from London!" Everyone stills, even the scullery boy, because post doesn't come often, and when it does, it comes with weight. Sometimes it's hope, usually it's dread. You're not supposed to have mail, of course, not unless it's been cleared by the housekeeper. All letters must be read first, all ink approved, all envelopes opened with the sharp eye of suspicion. The cook shuffles to the door, signs the delivery log, and collects the brown-papered bundles, flour, salt, sugar, all wrapped up like humble treasure. And among them is a small pile of letters tied with twine. She turns them over slowly, scanning the names. She calls yours. Your name, out loud. It takes you a moment to react, as if hearing your name spoken above a whisper has broken some ancient spell. You step forward. She hands you the letter. No expression, no warning, just paper and ink and permission to feel something. You take it with trembling hands. It is from your sister. You know it before you even open it. You recognize the handwriting, sharp, neat, and slightly anxious. You slip the letter into your apron pocket and excuse yourself. The attic is cold and quiet when you reach it. You sit on the edge of your cot, still in your kitchen apron, and peel open the seal. 3 pages. The first is filled with greetings and updates. Your younger brother has found work in a bakery. Your uncle is ill again, but not gravely so. The neighbour's cow has escaped twice. You smile at that. You can still picture its lumbering indignity. The second page changes its tone. Your mother's condition has worsened. They've written to the local doctor, and he is not hopeful. They can't afford a specialist. She asks very gently if you might be able to send something, anything to help. Not money, not quite, but something. You fold the pages carefully. You don't cry. You lie back on the cot and just stare at the beams above your head. And then, without even thinking about it, you take off your shoes. They are the pair with the thicker soles still intact. You clean them nightly, you polish them on Sundays, you treat them like the last piece of dignity you own. You wrap them in paper and tie them with a piece of string. The next morning, you slip the parcel into the outgoing post basket near the stables. You write your sister's name in ink. You don't ask for permission, you just place it there and you walk away. Here is your strange little fringe fact for the day. Some Victorian servants kept departure bundles hidden under their beds, small packs of personal items they could grab if they were fired, dismissed, or forced to leave suddenly. Some had money sewn into the hems of their clothes, some had photos, lockets, even letters. Your bundle now has a hole in it where your shoes used to be. You don't tell anyone about the letter except for Thomas. You catch him by the rain barrel after supper. You don't say much, just, she's not well. He doesn't ask who, he doesn't need to. He just says, I'm sorry, and he means it. Then a week later, more news comes. The Baroness is returning. You hear the news from the butler, who announces it in the servants' hall with the gravity of a coronation. She will arrive on Friday. Expect nothing to be the same. And just like that, the house enters a state of advanced performance panic. The carpets must be rebeaten, the brass must be retouched, the menus must be restructured. She doesn't like lamb or peas or bread with too much crust. She wants tea at 4 o'clock and then again at 6. She requires a hot bath every single evening, but only if there are exactly 3 lavender sprigs in the water. The panic trickles down like melted wax. You are sent to re-iron all of the napkins, all of them, even the ones that have never been unfolded. The housekeeper's voice rises in pitch by the day. The footman looks sick. The cook mutters old curses under her breath and peels potatoes as if they are offensive. You find yourself standing in the drawing room, polishing the piano keys with a toothbrush, not because it needs it, but because it might. The Baroness arrives precisely on time. Her carriage is black, her coat is black, her hair is red, tightly coiled and terrifying. She steps through the door and doesn't greet a single soul. Her presence enters the room before her body does, and the hallway goes colder by a full degree. You keep your head down. You serve her tea without a single tremble. But when you leave the room, you notice that your heart is racing. She is not the worst thing about this house, but she is the sharpest. That evening you find a note tucked behind the servant stairwell lantern. It's Thomas's handwriting. Tomorrow, same place. You don't hesitate. You sneak outside just before 10 o'clock. The garden is empty. The moon is high. The roses are brittle with an early frost. He is waiting. You sit on the bench beside him, barely even touching. You all right? He asks. You nod. He doesn't ask any more questions. Instead, he pulls something from his pocket. It's a coin, a small one, worn smooth. It was my father's, he says. I've had it since I was 5. He presses it into your palm. I'll get it back from you someday. You say nothing. You just hold it tight because you know what he means. Because someday doesn't just happen here, not for people like you. Not unless you make it. Sunday arrives, but it brings no rest. It never does, not for you, not for any servant. The clocks may tick a little more slowly, the lady might spend more time at the piano, and the master might read his paper twice instead of once, but below stairs it is just another day, wrapped in stiff lace and false smiles. The only difference is that you are wearing your second best uniform instead of your third best, and you are expected to look not just competent, but presentable, polished, and grateful. You scrub your face until your cheeks glow, you tie your apron so neatly that you can't breathe properly, and you make sure your boots, what is left of them, shine just enough to reflect the brass stair rods on your way up. You attend to your duties with a quiet, professional grace, No smiles, no glances, no mistakes, because this might be your last day. The Baroness is still in residence. She has not spoken to you directly, of course. She barely looks at anyone except for the housekeeper and Plum, the Pomeranian. But you've heard the whispers. She has made observations about the state of the household, about the efficiency of the service, and those observations have started to bloom into decisions. You can hear it in the tone of the butler's voice, in the quick footsteps of the undermaids, in the tension that vibrates behind every single doorframe. Then, halfway through your afternoon duties, you are summoned. Not by a bell, but by the housekeeper herself, who appears in the doorway of the servants' hall like a thundercloud in lace. "Upstairs," she says curtly. "The Baroness wants to speak with you. Now." You blink. Me? She doesn't repeat herself. She doesn't have to. You follow her up the stairs, every single footstep echoing as if it's announcing your fate. You think about all the reasons a servant gets called in for a direct audience with someone like her. You've been careful, haven't you? You haven't dropped a dish, haven't spilled any tea, haven't let your eyes wander above your station, but still you smiled once. You disappeared for 5 minutes that night in the garden, and you sent your shoes away. She knows something. Somehow, they always do. The Baroness is seated in the morning room, upholstered like royalty in shades of maroon and disdain. Her gloved hands are resting on her lap, as if she's waiting to be amused or disappointed. You curtsy deeply, silently. She gestures vaguely at the chair opposite her. Sit. You hesitate, then you obey. This is the part where your body begins to vibrate with the kind of terror you can't possibly show. You keep your posture straight, your eyes slightly downcast, ready to apologize for things you haven't done, to explain away the ones you have, to plead in the most dignified tone you can manage. But she doesn't accuse you. She asks you questions. What village are you from? How long have you been in service? Can you sew? Do you know French? Can you read music? You answer them all, steadily and politely. You're not sure what she wants, but you sense that it isn't justice, it's interest, an inspection. At the end, she taps her gloved finger against her knee and says, "You have a quiet manner and a neatness to you, some polish." You say, "Thank you, ma'am," unsure whether it is a compliment or a threat. She tilts her head. "Have you ever considered seeking employment in town?" Your breath catches. You know what she means. She is offering you a position somewhere else, another house, another set of stairs, perhaps a promotion, or perhaps it's a test. But you also know what leaving means. No more Thomas. No more Elsie. No more Plum even. You would just be another servant in another house, starting all over again at the bottom of a different ladder. You answer carefully. "I have considered it, ma'am." She nods and says nothing more. You are dismissed with a flick of her fingers. Back in the corridor, the housekeeper eyes you as if she wants to ask what happened, but she doesn't. She just mutters, "Get back to the drawing room." You go and you work and you wait. Nothing changes that day. The bells ring, the soup is served, the Baroness retires, the fire is stoked, and life continues as if that conversation never even happened. But something has just shifted. You can feel it in the way the house breathes around you, in the look that Thomas gives you that night at supper, in the hesitant "thank you" that Elsie whispers when you pass her the last clean towel. Later, while you are folding linens for the last time that evening, you catch sight of yourself in the mirror on the landing. And for once, you look, you really look, at the cracked lips, the tired eyes, the shoulders that have carried too much, and the hands that still sting from yesterday's starch. You have lasted here longer than most. You have learned the hidden codes, the invisible lines. You have endured the silent humiliations, the backhanded praise, the public silence. You have worked while sick. You have carried secrets. You have fallen in love when you were not allowed to. You have walked the line between a servant and a shadow, between a girl and a ghost. And now, finally, you are being asked if you want something else, something more. But as you stand there, holding the linen, your heart still soft from the weight of it all, you realize you don't know if you want to go. Because this house, for all of its cruelty, has become a part of you. Or maybe you have just become a part of it. There is no dramatic ending here, no final insult, no triumphant escape. Just the steady hum of work continuing, the lamps being lit, the coal being fetched, the night falling just as it always does. And you just keep going, because in this house, survival is the story. And you have gotten very good at telling it. And now, as the lamps flicker low and the fireplace shrinks to a bed of quiet coals, the house finally settles into something that is close to peace. Not joy, not warmth, but peace. The thin, brittle kind that you have learned to accept, like cold toast. Upstairs, the family has retired. The master has folded his paper, the lady has locked her jewel box, and Plum the Pomeranian has finally stopped growling at shadows. And below the stairs, the kitchen has gone quiet, except for the faint drip of a leaking tap and the last clatter of dishes being stacked for tomorrow's dawn. You, still in your apron, pause on the servant staircase one last time, just to listen. You can hear the house sigh through its old beams. You can hear the ghosts shift, or maybe just the memory of them. You smell candle wax, chimney soot, and something softer, lavender perhaps, or the fading trace of someone's perfume, long gone. And for once, you allow yourself to just stand still. You made it. You scrubbed the grates, you washed the linens, you stoked the fires, and you dodged ruin in the form of bell cords, baronesses, and a whole bloody pyramid of upstairs expectations. You carried secrets, you saw things you were not meant to see, and somehow you kept your shoes on, well, almost, through it all. Maybe you didn't escape, but you endured. And in a world that is built on hierarchy and silence, endurance is its own kind of rebellion. So, as the night deepens and your bunk calls to your aching bones, you press one hand to the wall, cool, familiar, worn smooth by years of unnoticed hands, and you take a final breath. Not a sigh, not a sob, just a breath. You are still here, still whole, still you. Now pull the blanket over your tired frame, turn your face toward the plaster wall, and let sleep come like a reward, hard-earned. The bells will ring again soon enough, but for now, you rest.